Yeah. We'd like to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council meeting at 6:01 p.m. on June 3rd, 2025. We will begin our meeting with an invocation by Councilmember Doug Courtney, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Scott Smith.
Oh, great and all-loving God, we come to you this evening with thankful hearts. Thankful that we live in a wonderful place and that we have such wonderful people as neighbors and members of our community. During this week, when candidates are filing for office, we particularly ask that you send your Spirit upon and fill with strength and wisdom everybody who steps forward to take part in the community. We particularly ask this evening for wisdom and understanding as we all discuss the best way to serve the city. We ask this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Will you please stand and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have time set apart for what's called unscheduled public appearances. As I look across the agenda, we do have one item or two items that do have public hearings. So if you're here for those items, we'd ask that you wait to come up to discuss those items on the public hearing. The two items that will have a public hearing is the new discussion on authorizing a salon in a residential professional zone at the Opal and Sage new use request, which is number A4 or 4A, and then also number 4B, which is going to be a public hearing on the general plan transportation elements. And so if you're here to discuss any of those, you'll have another opportunity to be able to get up and discuss that, your concerns with the council on that. But this time, if you're here on any other item, we'd like to invite you to come up, address the council. If you'll please give us your name, and if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes, please. So at this time, we do have the public comment time opened up. Please come on up and just state your name. Right, I'm sorry, yeah, just come up here to the podium. Make sure the little green light's on. Is that green light on?
Green light's on.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Karen McCoy. I'm actually a resident of American Fork, but the reason I am here is I feel like all the cities of a special service district need to be aware of some things that are going on. Your Councilman Smith, is on the special service district, the North Utah County Animal Shelter, and that's what I'm here to just try to make people aware of some concerns that I have. Utah has 59 animal shelters. Of those, all but 4 have reached a status of no kill. No kill means saving every dog or cat in a shelter who can be saved. Typically, the number of shelter pets who are suffering from irreparable medical or behavioral issues that compromise their quality of life and prevent them from being rehomed is not more than 10%. Therefore, shelters that meet 90% save rate benchmark are considered no kill. In the U.S., nearly 2 out of 3 shelters achieved no kill last year, but still every 90 seconds, a dog or a cat is killed in a U.S. shelter simply because they do not have a safe place to call home. This is a solvable issue, and you could be a part of the solution. In Utah, Uinta was 19 animals away from no kill last year. Tooele, only 1 animal away from achieving no kill. Utah County North Shelter was 531 lives away from no kill. South Valley was 736 lives away from a 90% save rate. The only 2 shelters with horrible statistics are right here in Utah County. I have made copies of stats showing animal ownership, revenue spent, projected sales, employment based on animal ownership. We are in 2025. Pets have become family. When animal shelters, governments, community members value the philosophical principles of no kill and work together to implement systems and programs to uphold these principles, it's possible to achieve a community sheltering system which euthanasia is performed only as an act of mercy. February of 2024, the governor of Utah declared 2024 as a no-kill shelter year. We are almost there except for Utah County. If you would like, I left my name and number and email address on your check-in thing. Highland City could be a leader in making our communities better by changing the way the shelters are operated. And if cities acted toward pet owners by stepping up and being proactive instead of staying in the dark ages, we could all make a difference. I feel like that special service district is kind of made, and it's impossible to hold people accountable, and things need to be addressed. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Wesley Warren, Highland City resident. I just have a couple comments regarding the expedited item, the laser level for the baseball field. I had a little bit of sticker shock looking at a $45,000 mechanism unit. So I did a little bit of research and calling around, and I know that the Eagle Mountain complex uses this. They have a 4-field complex that the city gets quite a bit of revenue from tournaments and competitive leagues and men's softball and all that. And they probably very much need a system like that. And other than complexes like that, you're kind of almost, this is a broad statement, but looking at professional ball fields that use a system like this. Normally, what you would see is a cone laser or a dual grade laser that kind of sits at the pitcher's mound and projects the field, and then you get one of those grooming and leveling attachments that you put on the back of like a zero-turn mower, and a control receiver that goes onto the mower, and the level communicates with the receiver, which communicates with the driver, indicating, how much or how little needs to be taken and moved and manicured, and that's pretty much the standard for single and double field small municipal fields. That with the attachment to the mower, including the leveling attachment and the grooming attachment, the control receiver and the laser all together runs about $5,000 to $6,000 if you just go on top of the line on all of those items. I don't want to presume to know all the details, to know if the city does need something this high end because of big plans for the field. But I just wanted to, at the very least, make the council aware. But yeah, so I would just consider that and maybe ask some questions along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so that nobody is confused later in the meeting when this doesn't come up, that item, I believe, has been pulled off of the
That
agenda
was
because
best.
staff wants to do some more investigation into some of those very.
So what that item is, the item number 5C, which is the purchase of the ABI forced level laser leveler. And I believe staff would like to pull that and put it to a future date, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that item, council, that will be pulled and put to a future date. But I do appreciate, Wes, your comments, and that will help us as it comes up to the future date. Are there others like to come up during this public comment time? Seeing none, we'll now close our public comment time, and we will now go on to our first item, which is going to be item number 2A, which is a presentation. We have our Historical Society here, and we have our Arts Council. We'd like to invite them to come up and give a brief report, kind of what's kind of going on in this city, and I'm sure they have some questions maybe for the council to share and things that way. And just maybe state your name. Just, I know a lot of the council know you, but just to make sure we have it on the record, but just in case there's one or two councils that don't know who you are.
Well, should I be first, or are you going to introduce?
Do you see my presentation, first of all?
Okay. Okay. My name is Darlene Stice Van Werkhoven. If the name Stice rings a bell, I grew up in the log cabin your museum here in Highland. I now live in Lehigh.
Did you happen to write a book or something that way?
Yes, I've written more things.
There's like a little book, I think, that was in the library on this. So. Well, welcome.
Yes, I've written a children's book. It tells all about growing up with the animals, and the illustrations in the book are pictures of embroidery, which I learned to do when I was herding cows along the ditch bank as a child. And it tells a little bit about the family toward the back of the book, and it has a illustration of what the 2 rooms were where I lived, in the log cabin, and then the kitchen was just bricks that they built themselves. I now live in Lehigh, but my heart is here in Highland too.
Thank you.
I'm Shauna Larson, and I'm head of the Arts Council for Highland City.
Okay, and I'm Claudia Sudweeks, and I'm over the Highland Historical Society. So we're going to do this together, and Darlene wanted to stand with us, so we're very excited about that. Okay, first of all, I've talked to most of you, and so you have some background, but I'll start from the scratch. We are going to partner, the Historical Society and the Arts Council, and we're going to be talking about what we want to partner for. So, first of all, that's just the list of who's on our committees so that we know we're representing them today. And we'll start with the Historical Society. So, we preserve documents, photos, and artifacts from the early Highlanders. We collect memories, collect written histories, and we try to honor our heritage and stabilize our future. So our projects for the Historical Society, I have committees for, subcommittees, I guess, for each one of these projects. The early family collections, so reaching out to them to find what they have, if they have better copies of pictures than we have, et cetera, that kind of thing. Digitization team is digitizing what we have in our museum, and documentation is organizing it and cataloging. And the genealogical and historical research, that's kind of obvious. We're backing up what we're saying is true, or saying in the histories. And the website, we are working on building a new website because we've been told we're too big for the city one. And if we can figure out how to pay for it, well, some of the universities might help us build it. Okay. Video biographies. Darlene we've been working on an oral history project, and she is the last one we just finished. We're recording all their stories, and Charlie Greenland and some others. And the museum, as you know, is this little tiny room in the bottom of the old city building, and it's stuffed, and we have all these donations from families like the Stice family, the sisters, and from Quentin White and several others, that is way too big for the area that we have. So we want to talk about that, having an interactive museum. And we also do outreach projects, which is like the 4th and 7th grade programs at the schools, and farmers market and the fling. This year is a big deal since 150 years of settlers in Highland, that kind of thing. So quickly, I spent too long on that, but just to give you, let's see if it'll play.
How about my mother? My mother was a great cook. On this cookbook that we're doing, I told a little bit about how my mother could make a meal out of almost nothing.
Okay, that was just a little taste of the kinds of things that we can preserve, and that's the beautiful memories. Like, I wish I could have played some of her stories. They are amazing. And now we're going to move on to the council. You want me? The Arts Council. I'll do that? Okay. All right. So the goal of the Arts Council is to expand the programs that fall under the Arts Council, because they too have a problem of not enough space, and they have a waiting list of teachers, not even people that want to take classes, of classes they have no place to put. So they offer programs for art classes, choirs, small theater groups, workshops, Friends of the Art Group, the Quilt Guild, the Senior Citizen Support Group, and festivals. Did I cover it all?
We have, I've said this before to you, that we have 20 programs that run under the Arts Council, so that it's way outgrown the space that we have over there.
Okay. So we're proposing that we create a place that's bigger, a Center for Arts and Heritage, and we're going to talk about how we're going to do that. But really quickly, just some of the potential options that we could do if we did that. We could have more programs, so more art classes, writing groups, seminars and presentations, clubs like junior history detectives. We would have fun with that. Genealogy courses. We could have a memory preservation room where we could actually come and do the histories, let people come and record some of their memories. Interactive historical family museum, as I mentioned. There is a big desire in the area for a bigger theater and performance area, because they have a problem with having to rent schools and matching their calendars, and they can't do big performances, so they've kind of pulled back from that. So we've heard a lot from the residents. An art gallery, and I will tell you a little bit more about that in a second, and senior citizen center and activities. I talked to tonight, the Dennis Smith's art manager has asked that they would like to make a large donation of his art to the city if we have a place to put it. He's moved into the legacy phase of his life, as the manager explained. So this is also something we would like to be considered as we plan for this. Senior activities, just some ideas there that are kind of what you would expect, because we don't have a senior citizen center here in Highland, and we feel like our two groups would be the perfect match to run that. Yes.
And one thing that we've started doing is that we have once a month, we do lunch for the senior citizens. We have about 60 or 70 senior citizens that come every month. And for some of them, it's the only out they have of the whole month. It's very important to them. And we would love to grow the senior citizen program here in Highland, because we really don't have one. Other than that, we do that one dinner a year, but other than that, that's where we're at.
Yeah, we'd like to have some little reunions too with these sweet folks. Okay, and yes, and she says that she doesn't advertise that luncheon because she can't fit many people. So that's Okay, so some potential sites. So let me just give you a quick update on what we've found out. There are two main sites we're considering, and yes, we know this is a frugal city, and no, we're not saying, will you please give us the money to build this, because we know that is not happening. Okay, we're not here requesting that. Okay, I'm going to be smarter than that. But we will raise the funds, but there are two sites that we're considering. One is the Strasbourg Chapel is a possibility, and right now it's mostly rumors, but we've talked to multiple people, and I'm about sixth up the chain at the church office building, and I've got probably two more legs to go. I talked to someone today who was madly trying to find the right person. So I'll tell you that what we know is that it's possible in the next few years that it's going to go on the decommission list, that the congregations there will be moving to a newer building, possibly 2029, maybe earlier. There's different people saying different things, and that the mission office and FM group would be moving out. But purely rumor right now until I have actual fact, okay? So I can't tell you that that's really going to happen. I'm just saying this is one thing we're considering, because as a historical society, we would like to preserve that building if it is not going to be used as a church anymore. It's the only historical building that's not a house. And the other is the lot across from the city library, where the feasibility study's been done. Donna Carden gave me this suggestion, because several people will say, but the library want that. But she's the one that told me that this would be best for our situation if we were to build. But anyway, we want you to consider that, where we could have this performance center and classroom and senior activities and family-friendly museum. And yes, there's a lot of pieces. This is just the beginning. We're showing up here so that you know what we're thinking about, so they don't hear about it in some strange place, that you know we're up front, and we want you to be okay with this. So planning stages, we're working on a 501c3. We're building a board. We have several people talking about donations, big donors that have kind of come out of the woodwork lately. So there's some options there, some grants. Some of you have even sent me some grant options that we were looking into. Drawings and renovation plans, that will be one of our next steps in the deeds of gifts and photos, collection management policy, because people like Darlene have taught me a lot. And website, you know, so that we look not fake and we are okay. And then we're seeking, I'm not going to read all of these, but these are the ones I have been talking to everyone. We have been talking to everyone. The Historical Society, the Utah, all, you know, professional nonprofit organizers, performance group leaders, early descendants, local artists like Dennis Smith, several of the previous mayors and city council members. Several people have given us input, and probably the one I should mention, the Alpine mayor and city council member Jessica Schmoon. There is some talk of they would like to coordinate some of these things so we can work on, there's art and these other historical things that they have no place, and they would like to work with us and figure this out. So we have lots of input, and yes, there are many things I don't know the answer to. Where is everybody going to park? What is the maintenance? How are we going to pay for maintenance? What about security and safety, insurance? What will the city's involvement be? You know, I mean, would we ask for the land donation? These are things we're going to need to address, and we would like to talk with you more about, but tonight it's just about presenting the idea. So, questions?
I'd just like to say I appreciate all your work on this. So the property east of the public safety building, or the police station there, is city-owned. It's 1.66 acres. And there's been a discussion over the years whether expanding the library there, it sounds like you've already investigated that, or actually building some sort of senior citizen art council building and things. I mean, I would support that. The question is how to fund it. And, you know, so I think you really need to look and see what you need, get some sort of plan, and present it and see what sort of fundraising can be done. Because right now, most of our resources are going into, you know, finishing some parks and public safety and things like that. So there isn't a lot of extra money. I think it's great. The Strasburg Chapel looks like it's going to be farther in the future. Is that what you're saying?
It's possible that it is going to be farther, and that's why we're looking at both options. We're keeping our options open, and you're right that we felt like if we really started fundraising and came in here, that might be, that was a little premature. We needed to talk to you before we made that step, so that is why we came here first. And yes, but there is plenty of talk about that, and we realize that there's a lot of money that's going to need to be raised, but I'm not as worried about that as I used to be after some of the conversations in the last few days. So, but yes, you're right.
I think just a couple things here. So there are some grants available for historical preservation, especially within local governments. I don't know if I emailed them to you after we had our talk, but there's the Community Preservation and Revitalization one, and that's a grant up to $20,000, and I believe you can use that for actual planning purposes, preserving a historical site. And then there's also some historical tax credit programs as well, so I can email those to you, but there are quite a few grants out there that are available for local governments to use for historical preservation. So at least that's like a point of starting off to help you in your planning purposes.
Yes, and I have appreciated you sent that, and that's the other thing is we want to be able to advertise for people that can help us request grants, and that can be over different pieces of this, you know, and another reason we needed to be up front here today so that we can be looking for those people. And if you have any suggestions on who would be a great grant writer or other things like that, we would love to be involved with them. And one piece I left out, and since Darlene's right here, I want to make sure I say that, is just some of the kinds of donations that are being offered to the city if we find a place besides the art. Like this manager told me that his 14 paintings that made the children's art book, you know, about the 14 homes of his friends, those kinds of things. But also family heirlooms, like Quentin White has offered some of the vehicles that his family preserved over the years, and couple buildings of beautiful things. And Darlene's family has some things that they, from the cabin and from other places, from their history, that they would like preserved too. So I just thought I better mention that. Did I not answer any other, was there any piece of those questions I didn't answer?
Well, again, I think it's good to get all these grants and all these donations and different things. The question is, you got to have some place to put them. And so I don't know, Shauna, because you're working a lot with the Arts Council and you're using most of the community building, right? So I guess the question is we need to decide where to put these things and how much we want to, invest in this. Because the grants and that are great, but you got to have a place to put them.
Right,
Yeah.
and we know that we need to form our own 501(c), and that we are building a board with a lawyer and an accountant and all those important pieces. That is part of the plan. We've met with a nonprofit professional organizer, and she's given us several pieces that we know have to be in place. We just felt like we couldn't actually do that without you knowing that it was happening. You want to add?
One of the things that Claudia's brought up is the struggle that you have some donations that could come in, but the families who would like to donate would like to know how they're going to be preserved.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's another piece that I did not mention. Thank you for saying that. Is we have some that have deals with us that if within a year we can prove we have a building going up or that's firmly in the plans, that those family trusts will preserve those things for us until that time. But if I cannot prove within that year that that's going to happen, they will auction them.
This isn't really a question, but as we work to finalize the new update to our general plan, one of the things I would like to see is for us to include some sort of plan for the land right across the street in that. And I think this would be a really strong candidate for us to be considering.
One of the things I think, when you say, Scott, it's about 1.5 acres, I think we've got to,
It's 1.66.
so we have to look to
Yeah.
see, because like you said, with the parking, what would that, if it's the Arts Council and the Historical Society, how does that all fit together? I mean, I know there's been some buildings put together when there's some studies back right around the COVID time, so.
Yes, and I think when we had the, what do you call it? The community meeting? No, when we had the plan drawn up.
The feasibility studies and that?
Yeah, the feasibility study. We planned on maybe doing a parking lot underneath the building. So, because there really isn't adequate parking when we start having big events, gets pretty full.
Historically, at one time, did the Strasburg building, which is at 6,000 West, 10400 North, was it offered about 15, 20 years ago? Was it being considered to be sold at that time? Is the green light still on? Okay.
Did you say that one of the more immediate, smaller needs is hosting for a website? Is that what you said?
Oh, it's not. Sorry. I thought it looked green. Forgive me. The Historical Society gets $100 a year, which is not enough to host a website on anything. So that is one thing that we are going to have to figure out, because if you would like us to move, and we are going to get bigger once we put all these video clips from all these people and all the stuff that we have digitized, we will need a bigger site with our catalog of our museum and everything. So,
Do you know how much that is, the hosting on that?
That's a good question. I did know this, but since you just asked me, it just went right out of my head. I would imagine we're talking 350, 400 probably, maybe more. I need to find out because of the size.
And you have a lot of data.
We do have a lot of data, so it might be bigger than that. But that's something that we will have to figure out, and we would love you to consider, and we will be looking for other options too, because it has to happen.
So let's kind of round back up, council, what they're looking for. Are we amenable? You know, as you mentioned, Doug, we probably, as we're looking at the general plan, saying, hey, what is our plan for that one, the 1.66 acres over here? Are we considering it for like more of an art, senior, historical area? You know, is that a not, is that, you know, because at one time we'd heard the library might try to move there. You know, I know that Donna is not here, but, you know, I know that Donna, who's our library director, has thought that maybe it's less, is a cost effective to add on to the existing building here versus move over there. I mean, so there's a lot of things in play. Do you know anything about that, Ron, or those who've been on the library board about that?
At this point, Donna's believing that adding on is the most viable option for the library at this point. That has gone back and forth, and I don't know that it represents the entire board at this point, but I do believe it represents where Donna is coming from.
You understand? Because in our general plan, we say, okay, it could be a library, it could be, you know, the museum,
Right.
or it could be that. But then, you know, because you need to start giving those who are looking to donate, they need to start getting more of a picture. If I give money, where does it go?
Right.
And what are we trying to do?
And we're trying to make sure we meet both sides of that and try to solve that, because obviously that's kind of very important at this point. But yes, we have been talking with Donna over the library situation, and we have been coordinating with the DUP and their cabin and trying to coordinate all the different pieces, Alpines and places, trying to just see every coordinated piece we can.
Yeah, my memory is such that when that property was purchased, it was designed for a community center, library, whatever. And there's no reason why, I mean, the library may not need to expand its circulation over there, but they could do their programs.
Correct.
And so you could set it up for a senior citizen, art council, programs, historical, you know, kind of a multi-purpose building. I mean, it's something to dream about. The question is how to finance it. And I think before you start talking about financing and getting donations, you really need to have some sort of design. And I can't speak for the council, but that's what that property was designed for. So maybe design something there and say, this is what we would like, and then start kind of getting an idea how much it costs and then present that.
You're speaking for
Yeah.
me very well.
I was just waiting for your permission. So
now I'm going to open up let me ask you, and Rob, I don't know if you remember, you might not be aware, the city just recently purchased the property kitty corner to it. So we have our park,
across the street.
we have this, we have that 1.6. But how much did we purchased, but we also own another acre, I think, across the other side. And I'm just saying, as we start looking, we might be saying, hey, this 1.6, but we might have more property on the other side that you're not aware of that we just purchased.
it does remind me of one thing that Mark Thompson told me, and when he was mayor, that there was an agreement made for the land next to the cabin, that there was some kind of written agreement promised to the Historical Society. I have not ever been able to locate at it yet, but if anybody knows about that, we do not feel like that is large enough for what we would need at this point, but we could give it back if that's actually I don't know how that all works.
So what I just heard you say is that you're saying that the Heritage Park, where the Pioneer Cabin's at, you understand that there was supposed to be some property that was donated?
Yeah, he is on our committee, and he is absolutely sure that there is some agreement written that was promised for the Historical Society. I don't think it's big enough, and I would hate to tear down those trees. So I'm happy with another solution, but I just wanted to mention that if it ever comes up. Okay?
Aaron? Oh, go ahead.
I think the key here is to keep our options open. I
Yes.
think we all have the same goal, and I support that goal 1,000%. I mean, I couldn't support it any more than I do. But Scott is absolutely right. We got to figure out the funding for it, and it's not going to be easy. But I want to get creative, and I want to support that creativity so that we have a solution for you that's real.
Well, we have some creative ideas of our own, and we've got some good people out there helping us. So I think we can make that happen. But like I said, this is a heritage and the arts-minded, education-minded community, and we just wanted to get moving with this.
No, on the opposite, we want to tell you thank you also. I mean, there's a lot of times you guys are doing a lot of work in the background. You know, the Historical Society, I think, is like you said, you have the small room down there, and what you're preserving is going to be very important for the future, and we appreciate what you're doing there. And Shawnee, you know, I think the world of you. I know that you've really helped out so much the community, not just with the arts, but even as you've done those luncheons, which we can't add more people to. I just want to tell you thank you, and thank you to your committees for what they've been able to bring to the city. We are growing. We're changing a little bit. We're trying to find out how to best serve our residents, and this is one of those things that we need to look at to see how we do. So, but I want to tell you thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all
I
you
would
do.
also say thank you. Erin, the email that you sent earlier in the week about council appropriations,
Yes.
was that for this past fiscal year?
The one we are currently in.
The one we are
And
currently
fiscal
in?
26.
Yeah.
So we're each
25.
given as council members a small amount of money that we can do whatever we want with throughout the year. So I haven't spent mine yet, and I would love to offer it to you to help with your website or whatever it is you think that you need right now. I had thought I would just say help you with that website, but I think it's better to say whatever you think would be your most pressing need.
That is an important start piece because we want to appear to donors as a real, we don't want to have a website that looks like we are frauds.
No, that seems important. So I don't know how that would work, Erin, but I would like to do that if that's possible.
Thank you
Absolutely.
very much.
We can get the Historical Society a check for that amount.
So, Claudia, let me just kind of add something a little bit. I haven't made my donation for the next year either, so you're welcome to have that as well. So that's going to help a lot. But I think, again, for example, on the Highland Family Park, the big park that we used to call Mountain Ridge Park, we had over, and I'm just as a ballpark figure, but over $750,000 worth of donations towards that park. So if you have a plan and a design, I think you can get some significant donations because there are people up at the north end of Utah County who have been very successful. And there's a lot of people, kind of middle class and different things, would be happy to donate some. And we have the Highland City Foundation that you can donate through. And it's a tax deduction, and that could be used for this. And of course, if you're going to establish your own 501c, that's fine too. But at the same time, you've got to have a plan. So we had a plan for the park. We said this is what we need donations for. We need a pavilion. We need the children's playground. We need this and that. But we had a design for it, and then you go out and get donations. And so, again, you've got to have the design for the building, because I think we're all in favor of building something like that over there if we can find the funding.
Okay, well, that is exactly why I'm here, because our board for this will move forward now that we have this permission.
I want to let you know, I imagine all council mayors would love to give their funding. Unfortunately, some of us had seen some things at the Highland Fling. I know a couple of us, when we said, let's don't charge for the bounce houses, we chucked our money towards. So it's not that you might not hear.
No.
That's where my money went.
I think you're going to see.
I know that you are all involved in many good causes, and I never expected that. I wasn't even expecting this. So
My recommendation, and I've talked with you, Claudia, is you look at as anything with a 513C, it's very important how it looks and functions out to that, and that fundraiser. They want to see that it will perpetuate. They don't want to see it failing. And so there's some things as you talk to that professional. Hopefully they can kind of give you the vision as you start putting things together, because that will open the doors for other grants or other donors, because they'll see that. Your family foundations, the reason I'm on a charity, and we've been teaching all about the family foundation, how they will move forward and what that foundation is looking like. You got a lot of individuals, which we got for the parks, where we're looking for, you want to be looking for family foundations, because they will have funding almost every year that you can almost tap into. And I know we've talked about different family foundations that might be out there, but that's, believe me, as a 513C, you can't just say 513C. It's exactly how you look out to the public, and you have to have certain reports. If your reports don't look right, that foundation will have a criteria they can't donate to. So,
I think we all really appreciate everything that the Arts Council and the Historical Society has done, and really thank you for coming and making the presentation this evening. And I think that going forward, everybody's very open and interested to, if there's something that you have questions about or want some to provide that. So thank you.
Well, I'm not shy of calling you, so that will happen.
And thank you once again for all
All
that.
right.
And I know you have a lot. Would you mind just maybe having some of your different committee members maybe stand and just introduce so we
right.
kind of know some of the faces you have here?
All right, we got Ray Bueller over here.
Tractors. No, Eric. I know Sterling. Thank you. Okay. We'll now move on to our agenda. We have item number 3A, which is a consent item, which is approval of the meeting minutes. Is there anyone that'd like to pull that, or would we be ready to move forward?
I'll do motion to approve meeting minutes of April 29th, 2025.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion by Kim, second by Scott. Are we up for electronic voting?
Except for me.
And I am
Get it
not
to work.
logged in yet, so this first one I will just do by voice.
Okay, so if we can get the electronics in, then I'll call for a voice.
I'll have to do voice. I cannot. The gremlins have been in my tech.
Let's just see if Kim, you're able to get in.
Did not go.
Okay, before you reveal, we'll go in. Kim, why don't we go ahead and start here with you with a voice? Oh, a voice vote.
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
and then we have also Brittany and Ron. So that passes 5-0. We'll now move on to our first action item, which is also a public hearing. This is a public hearing on the Opal and Sage new use request. This is a land use request for changing from the residential professional zone or allowing what I guess would be a hair care center inside there. So we'll have Rob Patterson do the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Last month, we adopted a new code regarding approving potentially new business uses within different businesses or business zones of Highland City. So this is the first one we've gotten. And actually, this is a kind of a follow-up to one that came in 2 years ago. So the map shows the proposed site here. It's dentist office and Bliss Beauty Lounge. Those of you who were on the council a couple of years ago, remember we had a very similar discussion about approving Bliss Beauty Lounge. I can do it. You can. It's zoned residential professional. Residential professional zone does not specifically permit nor prohibit this type of use. There's certain kind of medical uses that are allowed, physical therapy is allowed. Bliss Beauty Lounge came in and asked for esthetician type services, facials, and quasi-medical treatment, but also doing some hair services. The council looked at that and said that seems in line with the residential professional zone and allowed it. But they specifically said they didn't want to do hair cutting or coloring. We have a new applicant potentially coming in who is also here today, so you can ask her questions regarding the use. Essentially wanting to a little bit less on the esthetician side, a little bit more on the hair side, and include the cutting and coloring and other hair services that were not done previously. I went through in the staff report and outlined all the criteria. Perhaps for sake of not having a very long meeting, I will just summarize by saying it's a relatively minor expansion of use from salon minus haircutting to salon plus haircutting. And staff does not see any major concerns with allowing this use in that area.
What was
So-
the history of the minus haircutting?
That's just what they asked for. It wasn't something that the council
okay.
or staff asked of them. They just said, we don't want to do hair cutting. We said, okay,
Because
that's
it
what we
seems to
approved.
me this falls within the scope.
But just because
what
it
it
was
should be.
presented as very specifically they weren't doing it, and that's what the council approved, I didn't feel comfortable saying, well, now I'll allow it, even though the council very specifically
Got
asked
it.
about it before.
I got it, because they had requested it. Okay.
Correct. So happy to entertain any questions regarding this. If not, this is a public hearing under a new process. You're also welcome to speak with the applicant if you have any questions for her.
Any questions? I invite the applicant to come up, and then after the applicant, we'll have a public hearing.
Hello, I'm Bailey Price now. I just got married. But I am wanting to transition this into just a blow dry bar to a full service hair salon and head spa on the other half of that building, which I think could greatly benefit Highland City.
Any questions, applicant? If you'll be prepared, we'll have a public hearing, and if there's some questions that come up with that, maybe we'll invite you back up. Thank you. At this time, we'll open this item up. It will be item number 4A, which is a public hearing on the request from Opal and Sage to changing in the zone to allow for hair salon. Anyone like to come up? The public hearing is now open if anyone would like to come up. Seeing none, we'll now close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Is there any questions or anything on this or a motion?
Just a couple questions. I would think in our home business is in Highland that we probably have several people that are doing something very similar. Is that correct?
Correct. Though they
Just-
wouldn't have outside employees. They have
Right.
customers, but not other employees coming in.
Okay.
But I know we have very.
I mean, it's a use that's going on in the city. I was kind of surprised
Yes.
it wasn't permitted until I went back and looked. Well, I have to tell you, funny, when I've got trifocals. When I first looked at this, I thought we were talking about saloons. And I thought, boy, we jumped from serving alcohol at a couple of restaurants to a saloon. And then it said lounge too. And I thought, oh my goodness. And then I got reading, I said, oh yeah, this is okay.
On that, I'll move that the City Council adopt the conclusions of staff as finding of fact and approve the use salon and spa services, including haircutting, coloring, and styling, as a new business use for the RP zone.
I'll second.
And before we vote, I have two quick just clarifications. It was in the staff report, but want to just have it out there for everybody that we looked at the parking situation for this, and even if we assume that there is one car for that there are two cars for every seat that they have, that still leaves plenty of parking under our standards for the business up top. And then just one question that I should have looked up beforehand, and I simply forgot to go look it up. With a conditional use permit, it is fair game to transfer that between owners on the same site. It is when it moves to a different site that there's a problem. Am I remembering that correctly?
You are correct. If it moves to a different site, or if they're going to change either the exterior shell or the parking or access or something like that, then it would need to go back through the conditional use process. So as a conditional use matter, I could have approved it, except the use isn't quite allowed previously. So if this is approved by the council, then they don't need to get a new conditional use. They can go under the old one.
Thank you.
Do you know how many parking spaces there are there?
I counted it, and it's in the staff report. Let me pull it up here. 52 on-site parking spaces. So even if I counted, they had 17 kind of stations. So assuming one stylist and one customer for every station concurrently, still left 20 spaces for the upstairs use. So they overparked it when they planned it, which is great.
Correct. This is one of those few areas where we probably have it overparked. Okay. We have a motion by Ron, a second by Kim. If there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and vote on this item.
Mine says I submitted it and it received yes. I don't know.
We'll have to log out. Okay, before we go, we'll start here with you, Kim, to go ahead and vote.
Yes.
And Scott?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and reveal. That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to the next item, which is item number 4B. This will also be a public hearing. This is the City Council will consider adoption of 2 amendments to the transportation element of the city's current general plan. And we'll have Rob give a presentation on that.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We've discussed this informally during our general plan workshop in April, but I want to give a little bit of background as a reminder, you've heard this a couple of times, and for the benefit of the residents here, the city's general plan is largely informational or kind of policy setting. It doesn't give firm rules about what should or should not happen. It gives direction, with a couple of exceptions, and the primary exception is state law says essentially after you've approved a general plan, you can't build a road unless it conforms to the general plan. What this means in practice is we talk about road classifications. How big can a road be, and kind of where can roads be? Our transportation does give kind of high-level circulation goals and outlines kind of general location. Primary thing we're talking about tonight is the functional classification of roads. And we talked about this, I stole these slides from that presentation before, but the functional classification is where we go from the local street, low traffic, a lot of connections to it, all the way up to arterials and freeways, which is high speeds, lots of traffic, few connections to it. And then we have arterials and collectors, major, minor, kind of on that scale. And as we discussed during that general plan workshop, national standards based on our density is that you have an arterial roughly every mile and a collector roughly every half mile. And we've more or less followed that actually in Highland. You can kind of see that grid works out pretty nicely there. The other thing with the access, as talked about, we limit access and how many streets can connect and how many driveways can connect to different classifications of roads. So you see arterials, we require much bigger spacing between things because people are going higher speeds. We don't want people turning out in front of other cars that are going faster. On local roads, we anticipate there's a lot more connections. That's what they're there for. In terms of the type of classifications, the impact, so this is our local road standard. So when your basic subdivision comes in, they have to build a road like this, 56 feet wide, 34 feet of asphalt, and then on each side, 2 feet of curb and gutter, 4 feet of park strip, 5 feet of sidewalk. That's our standard road. And relevant for this discussion, 11200 North is currently classified as a 2-lane minor collector, which is this cross-section, 66 feet across with 44 feet of asphalt, and then the standard sidewalk, park strip, curb. So the two proposed amendments, first is to reclassify 11200 North. It is currently a 2-lane residential collector street. We would reclassify it down to a local street. So going from that 66-foot right-of-way down to a 56-foot right-of-way, a smaller, narrower street. The second proposed amendment is to add some language to the kind of goals, objectives, and guiding policies of the city regarding streets that give the city some flexibility in approving right-of-ways where there's obstacles to doing it in our normal cross-section. So I'm going to address each of these in turn. Feel free to jump in if you have questions while I'm talking through these as well. Just by way of history, I found some old transportation maps. 1980, 11200 North was a local road. It was also very, very small. In 1997, we had a portion of it become the 2-lane residential collector from 5600 West to Alpine Highway, but the rest was still a local road. In 2008, our current general plan, the entire length of 11200 North from 6000 West to North County is a 2-lane collector. But going west of that and east of that, it is just a local road. So just north of the Longhorn, the Sunset property up there, that was built as a local road because it wasn't designated as a collector going west. And then on the other side towards the gravel pit, same thing. So it's kind of in the middle. It was designated as a collector, but we actually haven't really followed that very well. Most of it has not been dedicated or improved as a 66-foot wide collector. There's a couple of areas, but by far the vast majority has been a 56-foot standard local road. And fairly recently, a couple of years ago, we had the Williams U subdivision come in, and the developer asked to build it as a 56-foot right-of-way, owing to this kind of history, and the council approved that change. So this is right at 5600 West. You can see on the west side where it's been built as a local road, and on the east side where it's been built more as a collector. And that lasts for maybe a couple hundred feet before it becomes unimproved ground on the north side and doesn't work out as a full road anymore. And we'll talk about this more later. I stole this slide from Chris. These are east-west collector, the data that staff has been gathering. What I wanted to highlight is 11200 North has the least traffic and some of the highest residential accesses. So our general standards say that a local street should be able to handle around 1,000 trips per day, and that's exactly what 11200 North is handling. It has a lot of accesses. It does have some speeding issues, but that's more of a traffic calming concern rather than a classification concern. So because of this, staff is comfortable downgrading this, and we talked about this general plan. It seemed like this is what the council was looking at potentially doing as well. So I just excerpted the little transportation map. It's kind of blurry because our map is blurry, but we'd basically take off that blue line for 11200 North and just leave it as a local road. So that means any new construction on 11200 North, either a new development or if the city's doing a road project along there, would meet the city's standards for a 56-foot right-of-way. So it would narrow the street going forward. Any questions on the 11200 North classification? Okay, now we'll get to the one I think we'll have a lot more discussion about. So the second proposed amendment is to add language to the list of factors that we address in how we kind of evaluate roads. This would be, and I have the text there, if significant obstacles such as topography, land ownership, or existing infrastructure impede construction of a street to city standards, and the street is necessary or beneficial to the city council may approve an alternative standard that promotes access, circulation, and safety. So high level, this is saying where there's some significant problem with a street, not just preference, but there's a problem with the street, and the city council decides we still need that street connection, we can approve something different than our normal cross-section, which are those, sidewalk, park strip, curb, asphalt, and then repeated. This would apply kind of immediately as part of pertaining to 11200. There's a potential connection there that I'll discuss, but there's other areas where this might come in handy. There's areas that we have talked about kind of at staff level where someone's looking to do a subdivision. They have concrete ditches that run right next to the asphalt. They've have, the road and it's ditch and then no sidewalk. If they were to do that, it might be hard for them to actually get a park strip in there without tearing up a lot more than perhaps they need to. In that case, maybe we say we can do a curb ditch combination without a normal park strip area. Viewpoint, the road going up there only has sidewalk on one side of it. That's because we want to limit how much we cut into a mountain and keep people away from the slope. So we put them on the inside part of it. We might want to do it for emergency access. So up in Highland Oaks, if you drive up Highland Boulevard, you'll see there's a little kind of street that comes out. It's not a real public street. It is because they built a really long cul-de-sac, and we said you can't do that unless you give us emergency access for people to get out or our emergency vehicles to get in. So we have a little narrow right-of-way that kind of juts out at the end of their cul-de-sac at the Highland Oaks area. So these are examples of where the city kind of already has done this. It'd be nice if we have something in our general plan that actually gives you the authority to do that. Obviously, the council has done it. We just like to have it backed up in our general plan. Our Planning Commission discussed this on May 27th last week. A lot of residents came out and spoke in support of the reclassification, so the First Amendment, making it a local road, but opposed the Second Amendment primarily because there's they have a lot of concerns about that connection. As part of a general plan, we did the little site tour, and if you go up, there's a part where 11200 North or Andrew Drive kind of turns, it does a 90-degree turn, and there's just a little city strip of land. And then 11200 North continues on the other side. So this amendment could facilitate that connection, building some kind of access through there that doesn't require building it to a full city road and taking property and all of that, which no one wants to do. So the Planning Commission voted separately on those two amendments. On the first one, reclassification, unanimous in favor. On the second one, it was a 3-3 split, which means they voted it down under the rules of the Planning Commission. And to kind of summarize a very good and productive conversation, the primary concern of those voting against was that 11200 North connection. And I'll say that those who voted in favor of the amendment did not necessarily support that connection. They supported giving the city the flexibility to address kind of those unique circumstances. And they recognized that it ultimately would be the council's decision how to build anything there, if anything is to be built. So with that, our recommendation, it's a public hearing. We ask you do the public hearing, listen to the residents, take any feedback, and we're happy to answer any questions. We see this as beneficial in terms of the fact that the city council, from time to time, does make kind of adjustments to its right-of-way standards when the city council decides it's necessary. It's nice to have something in the general plan that supports that. For that reason, we support it.
To summarize that last point, if I'm correctly understanding, what you're saying is that the city council from time to time arguably unlawfully decides to do things that are different than in our general plan, and it would be nice to have it lawful?
As the city attorney, I'll let your summary stand.
Okay. So what we're doing tonight is if we approve the amendment, is not necessarily, this is not approve 11-200 North, but it's a step that would allow this council or a future council, if they deem a connection to be needed there, this new amendment would allow that to happen.
Exactly. If there is something to be built there, we would have to have a road project and a design come to the council for approval, or at least discussion and consideration at a later date. This is not saying we're going to build something there. It does say if the council does want to do that, we have some kind of support in our general plan for that process.
Now, I noticed the motion we had before us have both amendments in that motion versus breaking it out, how you had that at Planning Commission.
I had the same motion for both. Planning Commission chose to break it into two because, maybe I should have presented it as two separate things. You're welcome to do it however you want. If you want to do the reclassification and approve, continue, deny that, and then decide on that flexibility question as well, and either approve, continue, deny that, you're welcome to do that.
Good. So you're saying we can make two different motions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, with that, is there other questions of staff before we go to public hearing? Okay, with that, we'd like to open our public hearing up on this amendment to our general transportation plan. If anyone that's here would like to come forward, if you'll please state your name and keep your comments to 3 minutes. At this time, we'll open up for a public hearing.
I just wanted to pop up at the beginning real quick. Wesley Warren, Highland resident. I was one of the planning commissioners that Rob alluded to, someone that supported both amendments, but I do not support connecting that part of 11-200 with a street. And I think that it's really, 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 really important to keep in mind, as Rob pointed out, this is a general plan amendment. This stays within the general plan. But also, and in talking to Rob during the meeting and then staff afterwards, there are so many parts of the city, future projects and past issues that we've encountered that could really benefit from this flexibility. One thing Rob correctly pointed out during the Planning Commission meeting was how this amendment is intended to allow the city to take what are traditionally the wide cross sections that we have to deal with right now and make our streets smaller, essentially, safer, more friendly for pedestrians, for cyclists. I think that flexibility is really important to have as a city, and I think to have it in the general plan, it kind of reflects the city's overall attitude of planning the city and redeveloping the city in a way that's more friendly for pedestrians, for kids, for bikes, things like that. And so I can't emphasize enough how important it is to separate the fate and the future of that connection on 11-200 with the benefit that both of these amendments would be for the city. I think one of the things that I asked Rob, and he can correct me later if I'm wrong, but with that connection, if we did want to make it part of the trail system, if we wanted to put a little trail there that's just for pedestrians, just for bikes, it's very obviously a trail, it's not for cars or motor vehicles, that this amendment would actually help the city to be flexible in how they treat that. So yeah, just my 2 cents, reiterating kind of my stance from Planning Commission, and I appreciate your guys' work on this. Thanks.
My name is Kelsey Chamberlain, and I live on 11-200, right on the corner, right, not 5600 that you were looking at, but 5500. So I see the cars zooming all day, every day, having small children. There's 2 bus stops that are there. I saw that the schools were pointed out, but not bus stops. And there's the junior high and elementary school bus stops in front of my house and to the side. And so I just really support doing something to, I guess, try to help traffic on that or slow down traffic there. So I guess making the road smaller is the intent there. So I just support that as I see it firsthand every day. And I hope if that Second Amendment goes through that I didn't see schools, or I saw schools considered, but not like bus stops where there's lots of kids. There's probably 50 kids going in and out on the bus, that also becomes something that is considered when we make decisions if it just does go to the council, not through like public hearings and stuff. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate all you guys do for us.
Hello, I'm David Wilkins. I live on 5650 West, just a few houses down from where the connection point is that's in question on 11200. Just on the amendments themselves, I am completely in favor of reclassifying 11200 as a local road. That is very much how it's used, and it fits of how it's being used and how it should be used in the future, just in terms of pedestrian traffic, houses on the road, and so on. And I feel like it fits well with the fact that it has that break in the middle. It's probably the most effective traffic break is no road. But the primary concern, and why most of us are, is obviously about that connector. Just briefly on the Second Amendment, I personally don't have a problem with it. The biggest concern is about the 11200 connector itself. That I don't want to see it become a through road, just for the traffic reasons, especially because of the pedestrian and kids that are often around there. I've heard proposals for like making it a trail. It's already a sidewalk now, but make it officially a trail or make it an emergency access. If it was decided to do emergency access, I would want to make sure that there's some kind of barrier in place, bollards or something similar, so that it can't be used as a normal through road unless the emergency services needed to use it and took the barriers out. So that's my info on it. And thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jake Hoffines. I live on 5600 West. In fact, that was my house right there on the corner. We've lived there for almost 20 years. All my kids have grown up here in Highland. I grew up in Alpine. Love this area very, very, very much. We moved from Orem, which was a very busy place, to Highland, which was a very calm, small place at the time. Now it's quite big, quite grown. But I don't have a problem with any of the amendments other than connecting that road. I've lived there several years. I've seen my kids almost get hit by several cars going 40, 50 miles an hour down that road. I've seen people slam on their brakes at the end of the cul-de-sac to stop so that they don't run into anything. I really feel like making that a through road would just open that up to our kids not being safe, but more importantly, it would affect the livelihood of that neighborhood. We moved here so that our kids could ride their bikes down the street. I'm going to be having grandkids soon. I invested almost $200,000 in a remodel of my house because that was everything to me. This is my house. This is where I want to die. This is where I want to live for the rest of my life. This is something that would change that. This is something that would cause me and my wife to look at the situation and possibly move somewhere else, which I don't want to do because I love Highland so much. One other thing, I think it's great that you want to make that a little trail, little through access, put up barriers so that fire engines, if they need to, can knock them down, go through there, whatever the case may be. But if you make that a through road, it will ruin that neighborhood. And there's no need. You have SR 92. It's plenty wide. I've lived here for a long time. It's not busy enough for us to justify making that a through road because of that. UDOT owns several homes on SR 92 that they've done nothing with, that they have several lots that they own. They can make that road wider when the time comes if there needs to be because of the growth here. 11200 North, making that a through street isn't gonna cost anybody more heartache than our little teeny little neighborhood where I take my dogs on walks for years. I taught my kids how to ride bikes there. I'm gonna have grandkids. You know, a lot of my neighbors here have grandkids. They get those little power, wheels and they wheel them down the street. That'll all change that for us. And I just hope that you consider us when making that decision. Thank you.
Jake.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for hearing me tonight. Thanks, Rob Patterson, for that summary. That really helped me a lot. I missed the meeting on the 27th, so that was very helpful. I'll keep my comments brief.
Can you please give us your name?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Mike Bennell. I live on 5650 West. I'm a Highland resident, and 11,200 North is just north of me. I know we're not discussing that road specifically. I'm not opposed to either of the amendments per se, but definitely that connection, and I think that should be voted on separately. I'll keep my comments brief. 11,200 North, it currently does not connect to 6,000 West. I understand it has been proposed that the road be classified as a collector, downgraded now from a collector road to a local road. That's great. I support that. There's even been talk of possibly classifying it for emergency access trail or other uses. In any case, the residents who live near or on the road segment should have a say with any proposed reclassification, regardless of significant obstacles or benefit to the city. The residents on my street, 5650 West, and adjacent streets are highly connected as a community, kind of as Jake just described. Our pseudo cul-de-sac is a place where our kids run free and play in a safe space without concern of continuous vehicle traffic. Yesterday, Monday, I observed there were over a dozen kids with shaved ice, cookie, and root beer stands selling stuff on the corners and having fun and enjoying life. It's a place where we connect as neighbors in a comparatively quiet space when compared to the rest of the hustling and bustling city. It's a place where we can connect as neighbors by yelling hi to one another across the street and then proceeding to have meaningful conversations, again, in a safe place. Development is great. I support it. However, 11,200 North is our safe place, our slice of heaven, and if the roadway were to be reclassified in the future, I believe the residents' voices and concerns should be heard prior to any decision making. I understand there are reasons for and against the proposals. For my family and I, we love our micro community. It's what grounds us and keeps us right here in Highland, truly, and we hope it resembles its current look and feel in perpetuity. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Black. I live on 5650, just a little ways down from 11200. I have found that the park strip, or the portion of the road that's not a road, it has been an inconvenience when we first moved to Highland. It was kind of annoying to turn off of the highway to try and get into our neighborhood before the light was put in at 5600 West. So I would often take the back route, take the light at 6000 West, and then follow the back roads to try and get home. And I'd have to make a big loop to avoid that portion of the road that wasn't there. However, since the light was put in at 5600 West, it's a lot easier to get into our neighborhood safely. And I now really appreciate the fact that the road is naturally calm because that portion is not connected. So I would say, yeah, let's not connect it. Now, a question I do have, and I know it's not my place to ask this question, but I might suggest the council ask the staff. If the city has already approved certain road projects that don't follow the general plan, is giving yourselves the flexibility to do that going to satisfy Utah code? I don't know the answer, but that is a question I do have.
Satisfy what?
Is that going to satisfy the Utah code that says that roads have to be built according to the general plan? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come up and address the council?
Hi, my name is Whitney Hebert. We live right by the connector, like one house over in the cul-de-sac. We moved there 7 months ago after we have a house that backs up to Alpine Highway between the two churches, and we moved because that was really busy and we didn't want our little kids by the road. And the noise, we like the area and we like the ward we're in, so we just moved half-mile down the road so we could have that. I spoke last week and I still feel very strongly, despite other opinions, that our kids' safety should come first. My little boy, he's 5, and I say, look across the street, look both ways, and he halfway through the street will look both ways because he's 5. We also have kids that have autism in our neighborhood, disabilities. I think it just puts a lot of people at risk, and there's been a lot of turnover. I've noticed there's been a lot of, unfortunately, funerals in our area, and then young families move in, and it's just, I feel like that will probably keep happening. I would love for it to stay a small, nice little neighborhood. That graph that you had, that chart earlier, it was like there was so many more houses on our street than any other street that you listed. Yeah, so I am in favor of making it a local road, but not in favor of making the flexibility so that things can just be changed whenever without changing the law or the policy, whatever you name it. But that's where I stand at. It was expensive to move, and this is less on my priority list, but I would not like the value of our home to go down because this road becomes busier, and it takes away from it being a nice, quiet neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
I'm Dawn Harris. I actually live on the property that abuts the trail in question. We moved in 20 plus years ago, and we were told that this path was not really on the city plan. Over the course of the last 20 years, it's popped up multiple times as new council members come through and review the city plans. I guess that the concern that I have and that my husband and I have both discussed is, who does this really serve? Because right now what we have is a pathway that people use regularly. It's a community space. For years, my husband and I paid to maintain and do the weeding and whatnot. Last year, this came up, and we chose to stop doing the weeding. I don't know if you've seen the trail lately. It is overgrown with weeds. We are willing to maintain that space because it's part of our property too, and our community lives there and uses it. What we don't understand is, why is it essential to have that be a road? Because right now what it is it's a community space where people walk, they've got their dogs, their kids are riding their bikes. And instead what you're suggesting is, if I understand correctly from what I've heard, a street with limited access, no sidewalks, and only for emergency use. I don't understand how this serves our neighborhood, because there's not a lack of access to our neighborhood. There is not. I'm sorry, sir, there isn't. Can you explain to me, when you've entered our neighborhood, what lack of access do you experience?
You don't have any idea what the access to your neighborhood is going to be like after a major earthquake, and neither do I.
That is the most inane thing I've ever heard anyone say. Are we anticipating a major earthquake? You're moving here from California, and you're bringing with you a lot of concerns.
Address the whole council, please.
I understand. In my 17 seconds that I have left, I would just like to say that as the people who have maintained this property over the last 20 years, we would like to offer to purchase that piece of land. Additionally, I believe that if you talk to anyone in our community, they don't feel that it will benefit our neighborhood. Thank you.
Scott Oldroyd, Highland resident, live on 11200. I think the two proposals that you're talking about tonight, the first one, I can understand you're downsizing it from 66 to 56 feet. The second one, is it possible to pull that up on the, Rob? The second proposal, the wording of that? So I just worried about the generality of it. Giving flexibility to me seems like a lawsuit happening. If you're flexible with one developer and not a different developer, who's to say doing what? So that concerned me. I think one of the planning commissioners mentioned that it's meant to make things smaller, not bigger. To me, it doesn't say that in there. If you want it to say that, then put that in there, that the city council has flexibility to make things smaller or less, or not to require a sidewalk. But the way, to me, it's stated that you could do whatever. It's pretty flexible. As far as the connection between the two, I would love it once you talk about these two proposals, and you probably pass them, to propose to make that a trail. Let's put it to rest. Because if it's a trail, it's 20 feet wide. It's only 20 feet wide. And I'm not sure, maybe that's big enough for a fire truck, I don't know. But if it is, and you make it a trail, then let's put up the bollards and have it be an emergency access if they need to, but it's still designated as a trail. So that's what I hope the city council thinks about and does, so that we're not talking about making this a 56-foot road for the next 20 years, different council, different planning and zoning. Thank you.
Are there any others? Seeing none, we'll now close the public hearing. We'll bring it back to the council. So, Rob, I do have some questions. So right now, what our plan is, in our general plan, it's 66 feet.
Correct.
Our road standard is 56 feet.
Our local road standard is 56. So our collector standard is 66.
Okay, so this is a 2-lane road in the current general plan. What we're proposing is to make it a local road. In our local roads, definition is 56 feet.
Correct.
So one of the other motions is to say, hey, we're going to get the council that they can go down to whatever is determined to be workable for the traffic flow in that area, right?
More or less, yes.
So now what stops, and I believe Scott brought this up, if you're a developer, what stops them from coming in and saying, hey, we see a hardship, we can get those extra lots or whatever it might be, that they can't now say we want all of our roads in our subdivision to be 20 feet, even though we have a standard of 56. Where does that play?
It's a very good question. So on the first regard, staff would never approve that. We'd have to say, we get you're in the middle of this development process. Would you like to take some time out and talk to both the Planning Commission and City Council about changing the road standard? And most of the time, developers don't want to waste that time, especially when I don't think the council would approve a subdivision with only 20 feet wide streets. Kind of a second thought is the council more or less did this with the Williamsview subdivision. The developer came in and asked to reduce the standard from 66 feet to 56 feet on the 11200, and the council granted it. So the council has done this. I don't think this would become a regular thing. Most developers would understand, I think, not the way the proposed amendment is worded, and we can work on different language if the council desires as well, is there has to be some kind of obstacle that prevents the construction of the road to city standards. And an obstacle does not mean we get an 8th or a 10th lot if we don't build it to cities. That's not an obstacle, that's a preference. We can make more money that way. An obstacle would be we're building up, say on the hills, and we cannot cut a road through the mountain to make it fit. Can we take the sidewalk off of one side? And I think that would be something the council could consider. Now, it does give flexibility to the council, but I think you would have to rely on the council to not just give a developer a blank check to have different kinds of streets than everywhere else in Highland. We've held to this 56-foot standard for a very, very long time in Highland.
My take on that and reading of the law in that regard is that if we don't have the flexibility included in there, then council could still approve that flexibility. It would be unlawful, but that there would be nobody who had standing to challenge it, because nobody is specifically harmed by that change. And so realistically, putting in the flexibility, I don't think prevents us from doing that down the road.
What you've said before, Scott, I mean, looking at Williamsview, we have where it's supposed to be 66 feet. The council voted to move it to 56. Really, according to our code, that's not allowable. And so, in a sense, we're not abiding by our own code. What you're stating is, hey, by making this change, you've given that council that when we were the council that did it, that this would have given us the flexibility to have done that. Okay. I mean, other questions you guys have?
Yeah, I just have some comments. So I think the First Amendment, making the road or changing it from a collector down to a local street, I support that 100% because, I mean, we have so many neighborhoods coming in and complaining about speeding, and I think a lot of people in Highland would like to maintain their quality of life. I think it's this argument between quantity and quality, and I kind of, having lived in Highland a long time, it makes me sad, and I know we have to do it, and I use these roads all the time, but we put these major arterials through the city, like North County and Timpanogos, and I think they're important. I drive on them and stuff like that. But I'd like to preserve as much as we can the local rural field residential and make them as safe as we can. So I support the First Amendment 100%, that we lower this down to a local road. I guess the controversy that I hear at both the Planning Commission and the public hearing we've had today is what to do with that little section that connects the new neighborhood on the west side of 11200 with the older neighborhoods. And, there's been a lot of various opinions on what to do with that. I guess the question I have is, we're privileged to have our police chief and fire chief at all our meetings, and I'd like them to maybe see what their suggestions are, whether we need that for emergency access, if we don't need it, what they would recommend we do, and kind of just add their expertise into the discussion tonight. But I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but what do you think?
We're not covering that decision tonight. We're just covering the.
Well, we're
amendment
talking about the
itself.
flexibility, but that's the bottom line.
Well,
I'd like to know if we
11200
need the flexibility here, though, Ron.
I think that we are actually making that decision tonight in large part. And the reason for that is we're talking about reclassifying that section of road. If we reclassify that unbuilt section of road as a local road, the implication is that we're going to build it as a local road.
Right, and I understand that.
Right.
But I'm talking about the second half of it.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is the second half. I'd like to get some input from public safety on what they would recommend. Do we need that as emergency access or not? Do we need to adjust this? Do we need to continue this as a discussion with the staff? But obviously, there's a lot of controversy, and I'd just like to know what the public safety thinks.
So as we're looking, and specifically in the presentation, it talked about 11200 as an area that we would consider that we're talking about changing it from a 2-lane road to a local road. Any input from the police chief, Chief Williams?
That's not my question.
Oh, what was your question?
I agree 100% to change it from 11200 down to a local road.
But you're asking about the connection.
I'm asking about the second part, because we're talking about that connection there and the flexibility, what to do with it, and our instructions to the staff. And I think when I've read this and listened to the controversy in that, I think it's a little ambiguous what we're talking about. And I'd just like to know what they think. If that's inappropriate, we won't ask them. But they're here. Why can't we ask them?
You could ask any question you want. I'll allow Chiefs.
From the fire side, access, egress, ingress is always always good for us. If we have an event where we're bringing in multiple heavy apparatus, the ability to get in from different directions is good. That being said, we just need to be able to get in, right? So as far as the road goes, that's your call. But it does benefit us. And if we have an event, we have something blocked off, we have something happening to where we can, an evacuation, emergency evacuation, those types of things, those are always welcome.
Chief Williams?
We drive a bit, our vehicle's a little bit different than the fire department. And actually, I think we could get a police car through there if we really needed to, the way that it sits right now. So I will agree with Chief Patton. Ingress and egress is very important, and to be able to do that. But our vehicles are a bit more agile than his, and to be able to access those things is a bit more easy for the police department as it is the fire department. Now, I will say that it's been this way for the 30 years that I've been here, and my officers and I've always figured out a way to get around to where we needed to go. But that probably would help in a major emergency. Not probably, but it would help.
So maybe a question is, with SR 92, because we talk about that being a major thoroughfare through the city, or unfortunately it probably divides the city in some ways. If there was an accident or something that would close down that area on SR 92, one of the conversations I know about, and we're talking about 11200 connection, is that would be, even though we're saying this is a local road, it would give for a short period of time emergency connection for people to say, hey, I can't get through this section. And naturally, they can drive and anywhere if you start meandering, but it would allow for some emergency. Do you see any benefit that way if there's any type of accident on SR 92 to allow for a temporary time where they could move off to that side to be able to get through?
Well, certainly. I mean, if there's another way to move traffic as we're dealing with a major incident that might happen on SR 92, having that access and ability to move traffic up through there would be beneficial.
I mean, I recognize everyone goes, oh, I don't want all the traffic. We're talking probably a very short period, very limited time that would happen, but allows that type of emergency. And I think that's where Mr. Courtney or Doug, you're talking about is, hey, if we have different emergencies, this is the flow. Now, but we're talking a local road. Now, all of us kind of live on local roads. Our houses front local roads. And if I had my druthers, I've lived here now almost 34 years, I would have never allowed SR 92. They used to close it down during the winter. It used to close on down. Well, I am probably about 10 homes away from SR 92, and I hear it. And I'm not saying, I was going, we don't want traffic. We all don't want all the extra traffic, but I've noticed where you put the light at 6400 West, I'm getting more traffic down 6400 West. I can tell when there's something that's happened somewhere else in the city, because now I'm starting to see a lot more cars 6400, but it's temporary. Does that make sense? The next day it's gone. They're not all there. But when you guys had an accident on 10400, I think it was yesterday, that everyone started to come down by my road. And so I'm going, it was some accident situations that brought it about. So.
Mayor, that was me that didn't let you go home that night, that we closed the road, so you can blame that on me.
I couldn't get ice cream.
Well, I know that's what you headed for in the middle of a snowstorm. So.
Can I just say one more thing? Just as far as the agility of the fire trucks, we're not nearly as agile as a police cruiser. What we want, or what we would like to see, is a 20-foot width on our emergency roads. So 20 feet is about what we would like to see.
Now, and let's be transparent here. What was in a 2-lane road where we're trying to get 66 feet, in the general plan, we start having impact fees that we collect to be able to go and put in a 66-foot road. As we change this classification, it also changes how we start in collecting different impact fees. Does that make so? You have to understand. We have been since 2008 or 7 when this was passed. We've been collecting impact fees to be able to go put a 66-foot road in. What this does by this class of change, this will change on how we use those. We're not collecting that type of funding because it's a local road. Am I understanding that correct, Rob?
Correct.
So anyway.
Does that have any implications for impact fees that we have already collected?
That's a really good question, and one that's not really settled in Utah law. What would happen, though, is, as a practical effect, is once we get the general plan, say this amendment, and then the overall comprehensive that presumably will incorporate whatever decision the council makes tonight. We then need to amend our transportation impact fees and redo that study and see what projects we still need to do based on our current version of the general plan and transportation master plan. Part of this project of our general plan project is to update our transportation master plan to see what road projects do we need to plan for going forward. So we would recalculate everything, and part of that calculation includes your current impact fee amounts and adjust what you need to still collect going forward.
So I think one of the other questions, if there's been a developer that's paid into that impact fee for the roads, and we change this classification, and it's just a general road thing, we don't have to refund back any money as we do that classification change?
Utah state law says that if you don't spend or encumber an impact fee within 6 years, you have to refund it. And it also says you can only spend an impact fee on something that's in your facilities plan. It does not necessarily say that if you change your facilities plan, you must refund if you collected money for road A, you change your facilities plan, now it's road B. It doesn't say you have to refund everything for road A. It just says it can only be spent on projects in your facilities plan.
We just out of curiosity, we're looking to do a project over on Highland Boulevard, changing some with roundabouts and things. That's all going to be part of our transportation, so it could move over to something. That would possibly be an area.
Correct.
Okay. Does that make sense, Councilor? Yeah, the funding wasn't just for 11200 connection; it's for all roads. And yeah, we are going to be making other road changes. The other controversial one, which we filled this room before on, is North County Boulevard. So there's classification changes and
Right.
way we're doing some things there. So anyway, I just thought we ought to be aware that had been part of our impact fee. So
I have a couple of comments on both of the proposed amendments, but I have already jumped in a couple of times. Is there somebody who would like to hop in ahead of that? Then, first of all, about the flexibility, that I was really skeptical right up front about this, because we're talking about flexibility that we need in one particular location, and our solution is to provide across the city flexibility for it. And I was really skeptical about making that broad change. It was actually two of the commissioners at the Planning Commission that convinced me that yes, we should be making that across the board change. It was Chris and it was Jerry, who interestingly enough are on both two sides of the vote on that one. But both of them made the point that it doesn't matter whether or not we make this change to allow flexibility. The city council is going to do whatever the city council wants to do. And we have seen in the past that that is the case. For me personally, I would prefer to put us in a situation where the city council, what the city council is doing is legal. And I am unconvinced that that is the case, absent this flexibility. I think that we should follow the law. And this is a way of ensuring that we are following the law. With regard to the reclassification, I'm totally in favor of dropping the classification for most of 11200 to a local road. I think that when the council allowed the Williamsview development to put in a 56-foot right-of-way, that was effectively decided at that point that this is a local road, this is not a collector. If we believed it was a collector, we would have required a 66-foot right-of-way. It is the section that is unbuilt that I have a different opinion about. I do not believe that we should reclassify that as a local road. And the reason for that is because I'm very skeptical that we can put in a sidewalk, that we can put in curb and gutter, and that we can put in 2 lanes of traffic in the land that we have, and that we can do that safely. I believe a sidewalk is necessary, and I don't believe that you can safely put in a sidewalk with a road without curb and gutter there. The sidewalk, even if it is a 4-foot sidewalk, 2-foot curb and gutter, if we have 20 feet, that only leaves 14 feet for 2 lanes of traffic. I don't believe we can do that safely. I am also very skeptical about the council's willingness to condemn property along that stretch in order to build out a wider street. Therefore, I don't think that it makes any sense to classify that as a local road if we're not planning to build a local road there, and we can't do that safely. I would prefer to classify it as an emergency access road and define that something along the lines of a road not intended for general public use and that is designed and built to standards approved by the city engineer and the fire marshal. And I am admittedly very concerned, one might say paranoid, about emergency access to things. And we do live in a place where there is a reasonable expectation that we're going to have a significant quake at some point. I worry about getting emergency access and frankly egress for residents when we don't know which roads are going to be available. If we put an emergency access road through there, there is no guarantee that that road is going to be available in an emergency. But if we have 3 paths through, our chances of having one that is passable is better than if we only have 2 paths through. That is my thinking. And that's why I think that we should classify it not as a local access road in that section, but rather as an emergency access road. And there may be some other areas in the city where we would go in and reuse that same classification down the road.
So if I'm understanding, Doug, you're saying the rest of it would all be local, but that one section would be singled out and placed as an emergency access. Because quite honestly, I've gone 180 degrees on 11200. I really felt like we had east-west corridor problems, and we needed to solve it, and 11200 was going to help solve that. 11200 dead ends on both ends. I mean, having that connection to me would only be for emergency access. I don't know that we need to have it for the east-west corridor problem that Highland has, because we have that problem. And it forces people to go on to roads that aren't necessarily designed as corridors, unfortunately, because we haven't properly given access to the east-west like we should. Now, we added canal, which certainly helped, and widening SR 92 certainly helps. It's kind of mandatory we do that. But 11200, in my mind now, is just a non-issue to this, other than what Doug is talking about. If we make this change, I don't know that my decision on these 2 changes, on the one in particular, the second one, it's totally independent of 11200. I'm not even thinking of 11200 on that because I'm not sure that we want to make it a connection, except for emergency access.
So, Rob, let me ask a question. I really appreciate the comments, and I'm in agreement on making 11200 a local road. I guess the Second Amendment, as I've listened to discussion, read it, heard Planning Commission things, I'm still kind of confused. So you wanted in this, talking about reducing 11200 from a collector to a local road, then we addressed this 20-foot section, but we were addressing kind of a general thing for the city, making flexibility. But it's confusing because they were linked together, kind of, and that's why, I'd like you to maybe just kind of elucidate what your thinking was on the Second Amendment, so I just understand it better.
Sure, and I'll hopefully I can maybe rephrase this in a way that's a little bit clearer. I kind of lump these together just because they're both part of the transportation element of the general plan. It doesn't mean you have to approve one, and if you approve one, you have to approve the other. It's just they're kind of touching the same portion of the plan, so I just presented them together. On the second one, we just have a list of criteria that the council is supposed to look at in reviewing roads, whether to approve them. And my proposal is to add, because the plan is general, I went back and forth. I had like a whole paragraph worth of text that was really specific. And I'm like, this is a general plan. So I tried to make a general statement that gave some boundaries of when this flexibility would be used, but try not to, open the doors for everyone to say, oh, I'm special, so I get to have a smaller road than what is otherwise allowed. The goal here is, it was, I think, the conversation that led to this out of the general plan workshop was talking about 11200. But as I was looking at this, I was thinking of all the other areas in the city that we have done things, and for very good reason. I was also thinking we are potentially doing 6,000 West and 10,400 North. We may not have the ability, the funds, or the property ownership to build that as a collector road, but we'd still like to put in some right-of-way improvements to make it a safer, put in some sidewalks and curb. This would say, okay, we can't build it the way we really want to because we don't have the money, but we can build it better than what we have. And so this is that kind of circumstance. So this amendment, I almost wish I maybe had separated them out more, because I know there's a lot of concern about this 11200 North connection. This could facilitate a connection there, but it can also facilitate a lot of other beneficial things for the city. So we'd still recommend to staff adopting this for those one-off circumstances. Staff is not recommending anything regarding the 11200 North connection. We're not saying you should do that or not do that. We're just saying if you're even thinking about doing something in there, we need to have this to support the council's action. Does that kind of explain my reasoning on that?
It's very helpful. It's just that they were kind of connected, both at the Plan Commission and here, and so I think it adds to just a little bit of confusion, and I understand where you're coming from. So I'm just wondering if we made a motion, say, hey, we want to lower 11200 to make it a local road, and then maybe continue the second part and come back and look at that as a different subject, because that's a general subject throughout the city. Am I understanding?
Yes, though I will point out Doug's proposal would actually be touching on both of those. So I brought up here, this is our current plan. You'll notice the line is solid for most of 11200 North. Let me draw it
for a
here.
little gap.
Except for that little gap right there. You see it's kind of a dotted line?
Right.
In the legend for the map, it actually says the solid blue line is 2-lane residential collector constructed, and the dashed blue line is 2-lane residential collector planned. So this has always been planned. So you could give that little section a different road classification, like Doug is suggesting. But we may want to talk about that more and actually have a proposal before the council of saying, this is what that classification would look like. So we do 11200 North as a local road for all of it except for that little circle, and then give that something else, if that's the way the council wants to go, an emergency access designation. And there's a few other places in the city we could use that as well. And so we could, maybe you like kind of where we started, but you want more addressing both of those things, both the flexibility and how to handle that connection a little bit better. And maybe we continue them both and bring back something clearer for council to discuss. We're happy to do whatever the council wants.
I mean, council, I think you got to look at this map before you. You do have a gap here. You have two roads coming. And I think we have to, connectivity is important throughout the city. We do have this gap. Now, the question is, there's only about 20 feet. Is that what we're finding that the city owns for in this gap area? 22 feet?
So I was looking at the measurement on the county parcel map, and it showed it at 33 feet.
Hold it, that's 33 feet?
We're in the process of doing a survey right now of that property based on prior council direction. And so we've just barely gotten the results back, honestly, and haven't had time to fully go through them yet.
So the area from sidewalk to edge, maybe 20 feet. The area the city owns as right-of-way extends south of the sidewalk several feet. So it's wider than it looks when you just walk up to it.
So it's 33 feet, not 20.
That's what the
you're saying.
county parcel map, we have done a survey, we just haven't fully analyzed that.
And that certainly makes a big difference in terms of ability to put a road through safely, regardless of whether or not we want to is a different issue. But
whether you want to do, it's all up to the council.
That section that is not developed, what is that considered now? Is that considered a corridor, or is it considered a local road?
It was dedicated with, it's the Castle Glen Estates is the subdivision on the west side. That portion, it's kind of the T on going up to Andrew Drive, was dedicated with that subdivision as a right-of-way. So that connects through most of that kind of unbuilt corridor. For some reason, when that subdivision went in, we didn't require the developer to install the road all the way to the east. We required them to do it halfway. I don't know why.
But it is classified as a two-lane collector. It is just one that we have not built yet.
Classified as a two-lane collector, dedicated as a right-of-way, but we also sold the other half.
Right. Okay.
I love it. Chris, as an engineer, if you saw a 33-foot street and you have to have 2 lanes plus a sidewalk, if someone says you got to put a sidewalk, a gutter, and 2 lanes in to be able to have cars pass, what would be your recommendation what the width needs to be?
I mean, my answer would really be what our standard cross-section is normally. If we're looking at doing an alternative section, I think you could go down to as low as 20 feet of asphalt. I wouldn't want to go anything lower than that. I think...
You think 2 cars could pass each other with 20 feet of asphalt?
Yes, I do. 10 feet is about as narrow as you want to go for a lane of traffic, but there are certainly streets where that is the case.
My recollection is that we usually do 11 or 12 foot, but even at 12 foot, that's 24 feet, 2 lane of curb, call it 5 feet. That puts us at what, 24, 26, 31 feet.
We're about half 33.
If we're okay with just having curb and gutter on one. In fact, at 33, we have another 2 feet to put curb and gutter on the other side if we wanted to. I mean, that extra 13 feet really does make it a viable option to put a street in, I think.
Anyway. Now let me ask you, we're talking 33 feet. Do we know, you're saying county parcel, have we gotten any survey stuff back on this?
That's what Aaron said. We just have done one or are finishing one up. So the thing is, we're not presenting to the council a plan for how to build this road.
I understand.
So we aren't ready to say, here's 3 options for you to consider.
But if they're talking about making emergency access versus a local road, we need to understand, can a local road actually work in this area? At 20 feet, I think there's an argument going on. I don't know if you really can get
I think you're hearing, the answer is no, you can't build a local road here because we can't make it fit our cross-section. It is, what lesser standard do you want to meet? Do you want it just for emergency? Do you want it just for trail? What do you want? And then we can give you some options on how to build that.
But that's really not why we're here right now. That's something that needs to be discussed
that would be
in the future.
Right.
I think the Second Amendment, we need to, yes, okay. The second part, we ought to continue for further discussion. That's my feeling.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that the City Council adopt the 2 proposed amendments to the transportation element of the city's general plan.
Seeing there is not a second, that motion fails. Is there another motion?
Doug, I hope you make a motion that will outline what you want, because I think we support that.
I think that I will make an explanation of what I'm thinking of before I make a motion. It sounds to me as if we are not ready to decide on what wants to happen in that unbuilt section. I personally strongly believe that how we reclassify it is dependent on what we're doing with it. I do not want to reclassify it as a local road if we are not going to put a local road through. So that section of it, I think the question of reclassification needs to be continued because it just sounds as if we are not ready to do that.
I agree.
The broader, the other issue of flexibility, I personally am okay with making a decision about that. I am in favor of that. I'm not sure. I have heard some skepticism about making a decision tonight, and so I will. First of all, I move that we reclassify 11,200 North as a local road with the exception of the unbuilt portion, which we do not reclassify at this point.
And I'll second that.
So your motion, just to clarify, is to change everything in the city except for that 11,200, which would be come back at a different time.
For the reclassification, the First Amendment, the top amendment,
Does that mean you would?
to reclassify 11,200 as a local road, with the exception that we not reclassify the unbuilt,
Which means that remains a corridor.
which at this point means that that remains
Trail corridor.
classified as a two-lane collector. But the expectation is that we will come back to that, decide what we want to do with it, and reclassify it appropriately at that time.
We have that in the motion because I think that's an important distinction. Because if we don't reclassify it tonight, then we are moving forward with a two-lane.
My preference would be to handle that as a second thing where we continue that
Is there a reason not
portion
to
of it.
continue the whole thing? Does that make sense? I mean, you're only doing this, is there a reason not to continue the whole thing, to bring it back as a whole package?
The only reason that I would prefer not to continue the entire thing is because I think we have a lot of residents who have attended 2 meetings so far about the reclassification, and I would like to make what decision we can for them. But the reality is that everybody will probably be back when we're deciding about what to do in that central section. So maybe that's a needless distinction that I'm making.
I think everyone's here about the gap.
But if tonight we're talking about two motions, right? Potentially when we get to the point where we're deciding what to do in the gap, and then potentially and approving some sort of design, we're talking about 3 motions. Honestly, if you can knock a couple out tonight, it would be better, I believe, right? If
Start the decision process.
Start the decision process, right? Not locking yourself into what that section is going to be or stay
Right.
status quo. But the first, or the motion about changing the standards to allow for some deviation, I guess is the question, is council ready on that one? And could that one be done?
Before we address that, I believe we do have a motion that has been seconded on the floor to reclassify everything except for the unbuilt section. If people would prefer, yeah, right.
Excuse me, who
I
made
agree
the
with
second
that
on that?
incidentally,
But we do
Aaron.
have a motion where Doug made it and Scott seconded.
Right.
So Scott was the second on that
I
motion.
was.
It was to reclassify to a local road except to the area that is the gap, that would come back at a later date.
Right.
Stephanie, did you understand that motion?
Yeah, I understand that we're going to reclassify 11,200 as a local road with the exception of the unbuilt portion, which will be brought back to council to reclassify that portion appropriately. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe to emergency.
So if you want, we can vote on that one specific item. That is a motion. So we will now move forward with that. Is everyone clear what we're voting on?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Do we have electronic voting up there?
I'm going to have to vote.
Yeah, let's just wait a second so they can get electronic. If not, we could do a voice vote on the whole thing if it's going to be better. Okay. Okay, Scott?
I'm going to vote the yes.
Okay, go ahead and go. That passes 5-0. Is there any other discussion since there was 2 motions or 2 items here on the agenda?
No, we have to continue.
I will move to, I move that the city council adopt the amendment number 2, which is the item about the flexibility, recognizing that a little bit of discussion, we may quickly decide that we're either continuing that or denying that motion, but that seems like the easiest way to make a decision for tonight.
Did you make a motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay, can you clarify your motion?
I move that the city council approve the flexibility amendment that was included in the staff report.
I'll second it.
Yeah, I have a motion by Doug, second by Ron. Now we'll have a second. Do we have a second slide? Okay, we're just going to go ahead and start with a voice vote, and we'll start down here.
Before we vote, I know that Scott had specifically been into. Would you like to speak about why you'd like to?
Well, I just, this part on the flexibility, I just like to have it brought back by the staff with a little more explication about, all these areas in the city that may be affected, because you're making a citywide thing that got linked into one road. And I'd just like it to come back and have more discussion on the flexibility, because there are other areas in the city, and this road may just, or this connection may just be emergency only with a trail or something, but, I'd like it to come back and maybe discuss other areas in the city where you're thinking. I just think it got too linked into this one, yeah. So I would probably lean towards a continuation of it and have the staff come back at some point, but.
And to be clear, Rob, if we were to vote down this motion this evening, it could be brought back at a future meeting. That effectively voting it down now either means we don't want to do it or that we want to bring it back later.
Correct. If the motion fails, we would consider it deemed you don't want to do it unless someone also moved then to continue it for further discussion.
So you want a continuance versus a denial?
You have a motion. I mean, you could also vote to deny, I guess, if you wanted. We would assume this is a motion to approve it. If that doesn't pass, we're assuming it's a no, and then you could follow up with a motion saying, let's continue it, so we at least know it's a no for now. We'll bring it back.
Let's get as complicated as you can. Okay. Stephanie, could you repeat back what the motion was?
I don't know if I
We're having a
can,
hard time with
honestly.
this one.
I have that Doug moved to adopt the amendment number 2 about flexibility that's included in the staff report, and Ron seconded. Does that summarize what the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Is everyone clear what they'll be voting on? Okay. We do not have a slide on this. So I'm actually going to start down here with you, Brittany.
Yes.
Scott.
No.
Doug.
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
Ron. Yes. Okay, that passes 4-1. Okay.
So so for staffs, the thing we're bringing back will be the classification of that gap and to have a discussion regarding what the council wants to do there and how to put that into the transportation master plan.
And those presumably want to be at the same time.
Yes,
Discussion.
it'll be a discussion of the gap.
But if I understand correctly, based on the conversation, you need some potential designs to make a decision on that.
Are you looking for designs? Are you looking to see, one, I think we're looking for the survey to verify what we actually own. Do we want them to show if it's feasibility to have a road through there?
Well, I think the general trend, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I think the general trend was not to have a road there and to have some sort of maybe emergency access in case we had something bad happen. And that's kind of what I got from the discussion, but maybe I'm just putting my own bias in there.
I guess that could be even what kind of an emergency access are we talking about? Does that include bollards? Does it not?
Is that what the
It
whole
could be
council-
bollards. It could be a design. It could be bollards. It could be whatever.
Is the whole council wanting to see roads or just emergency access?
Or do you want to see options for kind of both?
Options.
Okay, hold it. Ron, you want options or do you want this one specific? I want options. Kim, you said both. Doug?
My inclination, I am strongly inclined toward putting just emergency access through. And for me, I would not like to spend a lot of time working on designs. But if we did have something that was easy to put together and could show that, yes, we can very plausibly put one together, that would probably be a good thing to.
So you would like to see options, okay.
So I guess I'd like to define options that Councilman Kimball and Kim. What do you mean by options? Are you talking about options for emergency access or a road or just everything? I'm just curious.
So option for residential road or emergency access. So I want to know those survey results to see how much land we do actually own there.
So you're talking about all options?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not collector, but yeah.
Well, yeah,
road.
it can't be a collector now. But
Options is
Yeah.
a local road or options as emergency access only.
And Ron, are you in agreement? All options? Okay.
Doug only wants.
Literally, it's just for the option to do it. I think I know where I'm going to vote. I don't know that we need to have that connector, but we do need the emergency access. But I do not want to make that decision tonight. And I would like to really review, and study it more to see which option is the best. I'm leaning one direction, but I've got to be open-minded.
Okay.
So I'm leaning to looking at options if we want to make it an emergency access, but I really am not interested in putting a road through there, so.
Brittany,
yeah.
where are you at?
I'm not interested in putting a road through there. I'm more interested in emergency access, but I would like to see if it's even feasible, because that makes the discussion really easy, right?
And to be clear, to attempt to be clear, since it sounds like I may be the third, I would like to see something along the line of options. When I say options, I'm not thinking about anything more involved than a sketch on a sheet of paper that says, look, we could put a curb and gutter here, we could put a lane here, we could put some sort of whatever the divider looks like. If it's paint, we could put a lane here, we could curb and gutter and sidewalk. I'm not thinking about anything that is engineered. I'm not thinking anything that is more than truly like a sketch on a sheet of paper level of work on it.
It's a Chris trustee sketch. Yeah. So, okay, with that, I think we've got the staff clear what we're looking for. Okay, we'll now move on to number 4C, which is the ordinance, the SWPPP violation code update. That will be you, Chris.
I am wondering if council would indulge me for a 3-minute
How about we give
break.
it 5?
Whatever you would like. I will be back in 3 if we need to.
Let's just plan on getting a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back in. Is that okay? We do have still a long meeting tonight. We have a work session plus closed meeting. No work session. Oh, that's right. They did. We'll go to item number 4C, which is an ordinance for the SWPPP violation code update, and this will be Chris Trustee that will be giving us the update on this.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. This is an update to state code as it relates to our stormwater pollution prevention plans. Senate Bill 220 updated the portions of State Code 19-5-108.3 that oversees construction site stormwater runoff control. Added to this code was the provision that a municipal authority, such as Highland City, may impose fines for violations of an approved stormwater pollution prevention plan. The ability to levy fines will increase the city's ability to ensure that construction sites within the city conform to state and municipal code. Fines must be used to fund the city's public education and outreach program, which is part of our stormwater management plan that we currently have with the city. Probably needs to be a little bit more active than what we've been in the past, but if we start collecting fines, we could probably make sure that we find things that we can use that for. Fines may be assessed for working without a permit, $500 per occurrence. Tracking mud on a city road, $300 per occurrence. Failure to clean up or report spills, $250 per occurrence. Failure to conduct inspections, $100 per occurrence. Failure to maintain stormwater records, $100 per occurrence. And the failure to use general best management practices, which would be $500 per occurrence. I think probably the biggest complaint we get is mud on the road, and that can be really hard sometimes. And this is something that we think will really help our city's ability to help ensure that we get compliance on this.
Okay.
Rob, do you? So with that, happy to entertain questions.
Just by updates, was there fine amounts before and we're just increasing it, or there were no fines?
There were no fines allowed without. They did say that cities could assess some of their own fines, but there was no dollar amount that was ever established with it.
Okay.
So this is all fairly new.
And these are the specific fine amounts that are included in state law.
Correct.
And so, as I understand from reading this is kind of with development. I mean, I'm not going to get fined $300 if I have muddy shoes.
No. This would just be if you have a development that's going on where you need to have a notice of intent or a stormwater pollution prevention plan filed with the state, something that we would monitor and actually go out for. So that usually is for sites that are larger than 1 acre in site or are part of a common plan of development that's larger than 1 acre.
So how does this affect existing storm drain? So for example, in my neighborhood at one point, there was a trailer that came in and people basically were living in that trailer and they put their sewage and their water into the storm drain.
They wouldn't actually fall under the umbrella of.
They wouldn't fall under this at all.
Of this.
They just, but other
Because
city
they don't have.
ordinances. Okay.
Yeah, there's other codes that we could go after them with that though. Part of the illicit discharge portion of the state code and our MS4 permit.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the Highland City Council approve the ordinance authorizing the updates to the Highland Municipal Code Storm Water Management Discharge and Control, Chapter 13.18.100 penalties to include possible fines for violations and authorize the fines be added to the city's fee schedule.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Ron. Is there further discussion needed? If not, we'll go right to vote. Ron and Scott, were you able to?
Yes.
And
I'm still
Ron?
having trouble.
Ron, what would be your, okay.
100%.
Scott, so that's a 5-0. Yeah. Okay. We'll now move on to our expedited items. We have 3 expedited items. We have number 5A, which is a code amendment, is the parking and trailers on city streets. That's Rob.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This was a request. We kind of discussed this last council meeting, and you directed staff to look at what other cities had done and recommend some code changes to address parking of larger vehicles and trailers on city property. Brent Wallace did a lot of work, looked at other cities. I drafted the language. He found it, though. So in short, we've revised our code to be similar to that of Provo, but a little bit expanded. Essentially, if you park your trailer on the city street and you relocate it within the same block or connecting or intersecting street, it still counts as being in the same place. And there's some kind of technical definitions. Every time you try to make a code more applicable, you have to get more legally with it. But I drew a little diagram that was in the packet. So you can see the block is the red. It's from street to street, or if it makes a 90, I chose 11200 North because it has some great examples of streets. If it makes a bend, it becomes a different street. That's one block. So you can't, if you move it within that same block, it still counts as being the same place. Or if you move it on a continuing street, which is orange, or an intersecting street, which is blue, still counts as being in the same place. So there's still ways of getting around it. There's always going to be, if you make it, if someone tries hard enough, they'll still avoid the requirement. It'll just become much more inconvenient for them. So we're hoping that means they'll figure out a permanent solution for their parking.
I just have to say this is brilliant. I don't know where you got the research from, but this I really think is going to eliminate it. I don't know who would go to that kind of trouble, and I don't know how at this point you'd have a workaround. So I just think this is brilliant.
I just want to clarify that this isn't just for trailers, it's for RVs, boats, similar vehicles, because I think this stems from a problem with an RV. So this isn't just parking trailers. With that, I'll make a motion if we're ready.
Can I just ask a
yeah.
question? Quick? So how prevalent is this problem in the city? I can see that it's a problem in your dense neighborhoods, but is it just throughout the city? And maybe police can tell us a little bit. Do you just find this all over?
I wouldn't say we find it all over, but we do find it enough that it can become and does become an issue from time to time.
And I think Brent, he took some pictures, and I think he just drove in a mile, kind of just a circle around your neighborhood, and found 3 or 4 kind of issues that had been ongoing for some time. So it's not, not every street, not every neighborhood, but fairly common.
So it's a
Can this
prevalent
be
problem.
enforced on SR 92?
I don't think UDOT allows any parking on SR 92.
No, they're in front of the residents next to North County Boulevard. And there's a trailer there that's been hit, rear-ended by a car. It's dangerous. And I drive a bike, an e-bike, and you try to go down that lane, and there's just cars and trailers. The cars I can get around, but this trailer was a big, huge trailer.
But this is a good question. So if it's on SRNE2, it's in the city boundaries, but it's on a state road, is that something we're able to enforce on a state road?
Good question.
Good question.
We can come back to it.
I know we do some enforcement on state roads.
So if they are an obvious traffic hazard, then we will address them. It depends on where it's located, but we'll give them some time to move it. Sometimes we'll knock on the door. Sometimes, we've towed vehicles immediately, especially if they're hanging into the traffic lane. You know, that there was a boat and trailer that had been parked out. We know the residents you're talking about. We had a young lady almost, lost a leg because of an accident in a boat that was parked.
That was a dangerous, and then I ride an e-bike, and it's just impossible to get around those things.
Okay, so that actually leads to the next question. Who issues is it a code violation, or is it the police officers that do the enforcement here?
So, as with many, or essentially all of our regulations, they're criminal citations. So the police ultimately would issue the citation. However, for these type of things, often it is our code compliance officer who will go out and work with the resident, give them notice saying, hey, can you fix this? Usually it's only after they fail to comply, after trying to work with them, that we then move it on to the police.
I mean, that would be my only concern is, okay, I remember I had a trailer hooked to my truck and I got vertigo, and I'm going, okay, for the next week, I didn't drive my truck. And yet, the night before, I left it out front because I was going to take it the next day down to where I parked my trailer, but then I get vertigo and I'm going, I'm kind of stuck there. You know what I mean? And it sat there for the next week where I'm going, we are going to be sensitive to the residents to say, hey, you might want to move this. It's really if they're habitual. I think that's what Scott was are we after a habitual situation just versus going to ticket?
I mean, I don't think the police want to spend their time driving around Highland looking for RVs that have been parked on the road. It's more of, that's something we can handle as staff, and then if we can't solve it, we'll...
And I agree, there are some that pull their boat, and that's where they think the storage is at for a while, is in the street.
Yes.
I think we're looking to hit habitual people or deadbeats like the mayor.
Well, this also helps.
I would get at that.
This also helps Brent because, he had a complaint about an RV that had been parked on a residential road in front of somebody's house for quite a while, and then they could just move it 6 inches.
Correct.
And so he can't do his job as a code enforcement officer if the code it has a loophole in it.
Absolutely right. So is it going to be kind of complaint driven then?
Or I guess if you notice there's a safety issue, then you'll
Yeah, most of them are complaint driven, but again, if they're a safety issue, especially if they're hanging into traffic or if they're obstructing a stop sign that's causing some problems, then we'll address them immediately.
After our last meeting, when we discussed this a little bit, I went home and moved my trailer that night
I love that.
off of the street that had been there for 2 weeks. I just didn't know the code.
Well, no, and
So I'll extend that to deadbeats like the mayor and council members.
So I'm now part of an elite group. Do we have a motion here?
I'll move that the City Council adopt the ordinance amending Title 10, Chapter 8 of the Highland Municipal Code related to parking of trailers and oversized vehicles.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Kim, second by Scott. We'll go ahead and go to vote. We don't have the vote thing up. We just need to do a voice vote. Oh, there it is. There we go. Scott?
Yes.
And that passes 5-0. We'll now move on to number 5B, which is the Timpanogos Library Consortium Memorandum of Understanding. And this will be Rob.
This is me.
Hey, Brent, thank you.
We also have our library director on Zoom in case you have any questions for her. Regarding the contract itself, thanks. The mouse is not working. We talked about this briefly, at least a previous version of this contract. We've talked about the consortium several times, so I'm not going to go into much detail. What has really changed from kind of the initial contract is essentially making the consortium less of a formal entity. It's not a separate board, not a separate legal entity. It's just the library directors working together to share services and circulate materials between the 3 libraries. Each city remains in complete control of its library funding and operations. And if there's going to be some kind of shared services under the consortium, all 3 library directors have to agree to it. The term of the agreement has been reduced down to 1 year, but it can renew essentially as long as all 3 library directors agree to it year after year for up to 50 years. Otherwise, it just kind of gives high-level goals and desires for the consortium, which is sharing of resources where it makes sense. We've actually been in operation with the consortium for about 2 months now. It's been going really well. You may not have noticed it if you use the library because it's just been a seamless. The catalog has gotten updated, and so when you pull a book, you don't know if it's pulling from Highland or Pleasant Grove or American Fork, and our librarians have been circulating books between all 3 libraries for the past 2 months.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Well, having seen this operate, I was surprised by the volume of books that are actually being transferred. It's far more than I thought it would be, so I think it's a successful operation. The only question I have is, are we confident that American Fork and Pleasant Grove are on board with this particular approach? Because it's a little different than what we've been talking about.
We are. We have. They've actually, I think at this point, both approved it. I think we might be the last one.
Very good.
Now,
I like that
Here's
position.
something interesting, and Rob, if you have the statistics, I would think with us having a little smaller library that we would be the puller of books in. Rob, what's our data? And this is only 2 months. It's not long enough to probably get any, but this was interesting for 2 months. What was our data?
So for the last 2 months, our total books transferred to Highland from PG and AF, 3,312. So 3,312 books. Books transferred from Highland to the other 2 cities, 5,113 books. We have given out about 2,000 more books than we have taken in.
And one of the good things is that their agreement specifically says that they're required to maintain their collections and not just sponge off of us.
It does say that. I think one of the things I was talking with Donna about why that might have happened. Part of it is because Highland has a smaller budget for materials, Highland really focuses on the popular books, which for other libraries, they might get a fewer of, but have a much broader collection. And she noted as soon as it went live, there's a bunch of people who had holds for probably months at AF and PG that suddenly we had a bunch of books available for them, and because our residents weren't checking them out. So we focus on the popular books. We probably had some that a lot of residents wanted.
So, they have the deeper catalog. So, if someone's looking for a unique book or a unique title,
they have a much broader catalog. So, our residents are getting broader access. Kind of their residents are getting more access to what the limited scope of what we have.
So it's mutually beneficial. I mean, that's different than what I would have anticipated, because I would think the smallest library would have the greatest benefit. But that's wonderful that there's mutual benefit.
Well, and the other thing I thought was interesting in the agreement, I think if you read through, and I think all of us kind of did, was let's assume a book from Highland is checked out by a person in American Fork. They do not return it and they charge it. There is reconciliation back to Highland to reimburse that book.
Right,
You know,
right. It was our book.
And I thought that was one of the, is a good thought through. So.
Okay.
I was initially very concerned about this set of amendments. It did make one change that I was very pleased to see about basically limiting how we can allocate costs, and the other two cities, not that I thought they were going to collude and do this, but could decide that we're going to have a large expense and it is equitable for Highland to pay 90% of that, and we have to pay it for 2 months before we can get out of the agreement. And that has been removed. The thing that really worried me about this agreement, and that I was very inclined to vote against it until I had another talk with Rob, so thank you very much for that, that was removing the fact that the 3 library directors form a public body. That in the initial draft we had, there was the 3 of them were a public body that had public scrutiny on decisions, and What I have come to conclude is that if you close your left eye and squint at it, it looks a lot like we have formed a body that can make decisions that the 3 individual directors cannot make on their own. And so the body really does have the ability to decide the public's business. And to me, that means it should be a public body. However, if you close your right eye and squint at it, it looks a lot like the 3 library directors just being able to get together and decide, hey, let's have an event. And you pay for the meat, I'll pay for the drinks and the chips and the bread, and you pay for the decorations and the publicity. And the fact that we have been running for 2 months without this agreement in place is what convinces me that that latter way of closing an eye and squinting at it is the right way of looking at it.
So
I've come to conclude that really this is a complex agreement that defines how we handle the case when somebody owes a fine to Library A and pays it at Library B. And because of that, I don't think that it needs to be a public body, and I'm good with it.
Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, Rob, I just have a question. How does this affect Libby? Because it shows a book is borrowable, and then when I go click on it, it says this title is owned by another library with special settings for interlibrary sharing. As a result, you can't borrow it right now, but you can place it on hold. Super frustrating. Yeah, it's Libby. Really?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
Sorry.
It says settings for interlibrary sharing.
This agreement we're talking about was only physical materials. Libby is electronic. So I know that has something to do with the state, and Donna would have to be more detailed. Libby is with the state.
Interesting.
Do you want an answer to that?
Yeah,
Yes,
Donna.
there's a voice.
Yeah,
An
because
answer
it,
from on
because
high.
it started like
We
2
have
months
a voice
ago.
somewhere.
Tell me
Is
what
this
happened.
Donna? Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, so the reason that is happening, Aaron is correct. This agreement between the 3 libraries does not affect Libby. You're still getting all the service from the Highland as a Highland card holder that you were before, and it was not changed at all by this agreement. This is only about physical materials. The reason why sometimes an item looks like it's available, and then when you click on it, it says it belongs to another library is because libraries buy individual copies of books, right? Above what the state owns. The state owns 250,000 titles, but libraries each buy individual copies for their own patrons. And so sometimes when you see a copy that's available, it says it's available so that people say, like in Salt Lake or in Provo, can see that it's available, but actually Provo owns it and has the rights to it for a period of time before it's released to the general populace. They can't block it from being seen because they want the Provo people to be able to see it. But Provo people have a right on it for a couple of months because Provo paid for it until it's released into the general consortium.
Good to know. Thank you.
Makes sense.
That's very good. Can I ask a question of Donna? Donna, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So if this 3-library consortium is very successful, do you see a potential for it expanding out to other libraries in the county?
Yes. We've actually had a few of the other county libraries start to express interest in it. Saratoga Springs has expressed some interest. Actually, Spanish Fork and Payson have showed some interest. Of course, if it expands to that far of a distance, we would have to, rethink how things work. Maybe we're not transporting books 3 times a week, maybe just once a week or something. But yes, some of the other libraries have shown some interest in it.
So could this be the start of a countywide system like Salt Lake County?
Both Cassandra and Sherry hope so. Those are the directors of American Fork and Pleasant Grove. They're hoping that this will eventually over, a decade, maybe morph into
Yeah,
something like
if we're all
a
sharing
system.
resources, it seems like it saves money.
Well, and I
Yeah.
imagine, Donna, is I think it's really good questions. I imagine Lehigh's not showing interest because they're in the middle of flux right now where they're not in a permanent space, so.
Yes, both Lehigh and Eagle Mountain are in the process of building new buildings. And so they just could not face this right now because they're really very involved with their building projects. But
How-
I could see, I could see them joining.
As we changed some of our late fee policies, and we had to up also our out of area residents, have you seen some of those out of area residents? Are we seeing anything changing there? Are we seeing an increase? Are we level? I know we're only 2 months into this. Are you seeing anything going on right now?
I mean, some people, when they've renewed their non-resident cards, have, they've said, oh, really? But then they pay it.
Okay.
When we explain that it is because of this increased service, they kind of get it. I have not personally seen anyone say, oh, well, that's a deal breaker for me. I'm going to walk away. I haven't seen that happen.
Mayor?
If there's not any other questions, then we go.
Yeah, I do. Donna, on the all directors must agree. When there's 3, I envision, that makes sense. When there's 5, do you see any potential limitation that statement could make in terms of getting done what needs to be done? You have 5 directors and they all have to agree on the scope and detail of any joint service and cost.
I'm sure that if this consortium continues to grow, each time we add new directors, new libraries to the system, we'll have to readdress the agreement and look at it closely and see if there's anything we need to change.
Yeah, if we're open to that, then this makes sense, because it totally is understandable with 3, but you start getting 5, 6, or 7, it looks like you may have to readdress how that's worded.
Yeah, and we can do that. It's written so that we renew it each year. So each year we can look at it and see if there's any small changes that need to be made.
Rob, did you have some input?
Just additional information that Donna collected. While it looks like Highland is giving out more than it's taking in, which is true, per capita, Highland has 6,300 users. American Fork has 21,000. Pleasant Grove has 24,000. So essentially, 1 out of half of all of Highland users got a book from the other 2 libraries, and 1 out of 5 of the other library users got something from Highland. So a lot of Highland residents are benefiting from this based on the number of card holders we actually have.
So we have 6,000 card holders. Let's assume we're a 21,000 population versus. It's just interesting to see their population, what they have in their other areas. Okay, is there any other things or motion? No. Is there a motion we can have?
I move that the City Council approve the Timpanogos Library Consortium Memorandum of Understanding with American Fork and Pleasant Grove.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Ron, second by Scott. You have fell down here.
I failed all night.
That motion didn't.
Could you just do a voice vote? We accidentally.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Brittany?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
And Ron?
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Thank you, Donna, for being on. Okay, once again, number 5C has been pulled. We'll now move on to our first discussion item, which is number 6A, is the East-West Collector Road data follow-up. Appreciate Chris taking.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the collector roads for a couple months probably, so it's time for us to bring it back and have some discussions. We wanted to, a quick overview right here is just a map of the city with some of the different road classifications that we have. The big black line, oh, there we go. and bringing back the speed limit map that we have that shows the speed limits that we have for different collector roads, neighborhood collector, and the UDOT roads, of course, the arterials that we have within our city. Moving on to the next slide, I was able to borrow this from Rob earlier today. Where we look at some of the speeds and characteristics that we have on some of the east-west collectors that we have throughout the city. I think, you know, some of the highlights that really stick out to me is the percentage of trips that are 10 miles per hour over the actual speed limits, and they're the worst on the lower speed roads, 9600 north and 11200 north, although we probably can't consider that a collector road anymore. And then also Canal Boulevard East has a very significant percentage of trips that are over more than 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. So what we really specifically tonight wanted to talk about is looking at some of the speed limits that we have and if we want to adjust anything. Before I move on to the next slide, I do want to point out, looking at Canal Boulevard East, you can see that we are over 10,000 average daily trips on that road, so it is considerably more used than the other roads that we have included on this table. So if we could move to the next slide. We want to come up with some policies for how we set our speed limits. So one of the considerations we felt was reasonable is to look at traffic counts. And local roads, you know, we mentioned earlier that they're going to be around 1,000 trips a day. Neighborhood collectors are probably going to be a little bit higher than that. And then we move up to where major collectors are probably, you know, over 10,000 trips per day. But we also look at the road widths with some of the road classifications that we have that we had also shared earlier. Schools and parks, you don't see a whole lot of larger schools or larger parks, regional parks on local roads. You'll see those smaller neighborhood parks, obviously, but that's built to, you know, sustain people within the neighborhood, not, you know, people coming in from outside of the area. So you'll see those more along minor collectors and major collectors. Those roads tend to get a little bit busier, and you don't necessarily want to have that type of pedestrian traffic that parks or schools might attract on those. So that's not necessarily a great thing to have along a major collector road. Road geometry, more curvilinear roads, local roads and neighborhood collector roads, that helps to promote safer speeds along those roads. But as we start to move up on our classifications, those roads can tend to straighten out to where it's a little bit easier for commuters to get where they're trying to get to. Driveways, definitely would want driveways on local roads, neighborhood collectors, no problem. And then again, as we move up, we would like to see fewer driveway accesses along those roads. I was kind of looking at driveways, residential driveways. Obviously, on especially minor collectors and major collectors, we'll get a lot more business because that's typically where we'd have those zones. So I didn't really address that necessarily in this table. Just based on what we have currently in our traffic calming toolbox, we have statutory speed limits, just what they typically would be signed at for speed limits. A local road would be 25. Neighborhood collectors, as called out in our traffic calming manual, would be 25 or 30. Minor collectors could be 30 to 35, and major collectors could be 35 to 40, depending on some of the other criteria that happens along those roadways. Speed limits should be set by road conditions, and we thought an unbiased data-driven report. And when we have conditions like we showed in the previous table where we have set speed limits that are being exceeded constantly, that's when we want to start implementing some of our traffic calming solutions to those problems. So if we move on to the next slide. Did a quick heat map of some of the accidents that we've had in the last 4 years approximately along. I hadn't gotten the data on 11800 north, but you can see 10400 north, and you can see Canal Boulevard, and you can see 9600. Most of the accidents that we have along all of those roads have happened at intersections. You can see on 10400, you can see 6400, you can see 6000, and you can see Alpine Highway. And again, along Canal Boulevard, and and even in 9600. One thing I did want to mention, though, is we look at some of the accidents that we have on the east end of Canal Boulevard near North County Boulevard. A lot of those predated the curb that we have on that median there. So I think we have seen a definite decrease in accidents along there. I think the curb is a big part of that. I think maybe just some driver education as they've become a little bit more familiar, as that intersection has gotten used a little bit more, has probably also helped a lot as well.
As far as the legend for this map, the red versus just the blue.
The red and yellow, as it gets a hotter color, means more accidents.
Okay, so yellow.
So
bright yellow that's the most severe.
Correct. Yep. I also talked a little bit before about an unbiased approach to that. I've used a speed limit setting software called US Limits 2 that will look at different criteria for roadways and then come up with a recommendation for speed limits. It looks at traffic accidents. It looks at pedestrian use along the roadways. It looks at what the statutory speed is. It looks at what the average speeds are, and it looks at the 85th percentile speeds. So if we go on to the next slide, we have a table here that shows these east to west collector roads, what their current speed limit is. We got recommendations from that US Limits 2, and then we have some of our own recommendations and some criteria of why we want to base those speed limits on. You'll see 11800 North is 35. The recommendation from the software was to keep it at 35, and our recommendation to staff is to keep it at 35. And there's limited access along the road, and it's fairly wide, and that's why we thought 35 was an appropriate speed for that road. 11200 North, the software came back with 35. We disagree with that. I do think that, like I mentioned, one of the criteria that the software uses is they do look at the 85th percentile speed. It's just a portion of the overall formula that they have, but I'd like to remove that part of it. I think we don't want to look at using that as really a criteria. So our recommendation is to keep that one at 25. Really, the one that we definitely feel like we should change is Canal Boulevard East should go from 30 to 35. That was recommended by the software that we used, and the thought behind that is we have really high traffic counts on that, and we already have existing high speeds. Typically, and I'm sure Chief Williams will agree that you don't necessarily want to change speed limits along one road because it can be really hard for drivers to realize that they've gone from a 35 to a 30. They'll get pulled over and say, I didn't realize the speed limit had changed. We do think that if you're going to do it, though, I think Alpine Highway is a good place to do it because it's kind of an arterial. It's a significant intersection that you come across. We thought our recommendation is to keep Canal Boulevard West at 30, and part of that is because you go from the midsection, you cross through 6000 West. It's not as significant of an intersection, and it would be a little bit more confusing to drivers, is our concern. So we talked a little bit about changing the speed limit on 10400. Our recommendation is to keep it at 35. I think that's open to discussion if council feels differently.
But I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, so you use this software called US Limits, and it uses the road geometry crash data.
I'm sorry.
Data. Okay, but then this says crash data not included in it. So is it included or not?
So that with asterisk goes up to 11800 and 11200. I didn't have crash data for those, just those two streets.
So
when
crash
I input
data,
the data,
pedestrian use, average and 85% speed data to recommend speed limits. So you have a software that uses all this data and then spits out the recommended speed limit.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, then why is staff recommending a speed limit different from this software that has all this data that spits out this whole analysis for it?
The biggest reason is because it also includes the 85th percentile speeds, which shows what 85% of the drivers on that road are below that speed. That is a formula that has kind of been used to set speed limits on more of rural roads or state highways. I don't think that it's as applicable within a city street. So I think that some of those speed limits were higher just because of that one portion of the formula. I think, you know, if you look at 9600 North, the software recommended that to 30. And I don't think we want 9600. I think there's just too many driveways along there, too many access points, to where that would really create an unsafe.
So it
condition on
doesn't
that
take
road.
into account driveways and access
It does not
points.
look at driveways.
So you're kind of using it as like a starting point of how you then would now analyze it with
Exactly.
further documentation of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So I really appreciate your work on this. I live off of Canal Boulevard East, and have had a lot of interesting experiences trying to drive the speed limit, and some dangerous ones too. So I support raising the speed limit on that section to 35, with two caveats. One, I think as Ridgeview continues to expand and grow out, there will be more and more people from the north side of Ridgeview crossing Canal Boulevard to try to get to the Murdoch Canal Trail and the bike lanes. So we have a flashing light crossing which has started to be used a lot up at the top of the hill on Willowbank. It would be, if possible, I think it would make sense to put one on Featherstone, because you're going to have more and more people coming across there. The thing with Canal Boulevard East is it's quite a curvy road, and I think if you go much above 35, I've seen rollovers and all kinds of problems, but everybody wants to drive at 40 coming down that hill. I think it's going to become really dangerous as Ridgeview grows out, because I think Ridgeview is only occupied about 50%, even though it's probably built out about 2/3. But I think there'll be more demand. So I would recommend, if we do this, that we put a flashing light telling people what the speed limit is. It's 35, and to make sure we have safe crosswalks on those two roads, just for people on bike, because I see people on bikes trying to get across the road, and people come up that hill way too fast. And, you know, I had an experience, and I told you about it, where I was driving above the speed limit, about 33 or 34, and someone decides to pass me going up the hill in that center lane, which I thought was really dangerous. So I kind of moved over so they couldn't do this. So they went in the other lane completely, and I thought, I'm never going to do that again, because they would have had a head-on, and I would have felt really guilty about it, even though they're the ones that broke the law. But so I agree that it needs to be 35. And just kind of, and I've said this in different meetings, but when we studied the need for this road, or this east-west corridor connection, we thought by 2050, according to the UDOT study, that the maximum use of that road would be 8,000 cars. 25 years before that, it's already way above that. And I think in the general plan study, they were saying it was 14,000. So I think if we change it to 35, we need a flashing sign telling people what the speed limit is. And then we need to be sure that we have safe crosswalks up in Ridgeview. Because yes, there's no homes facing on the road, but there are those two big crosswalks with a lot of people jogging and with their bikes. So I just asked that for safety. And to me, it's kind of a little sacrifice, because going up the higher speed limit increases the noise in my neighborhood phenomenally. But at the same time, I think it's wise to do it. So I agree with your analysis. Does that make sense? Could we put...
Absolutely. In fact, if we can forward the slide, that's kind of what we wanted to talk about next. It's a great segue. Thanks for setting me up like that. We want to start looking at traffic calming solutions to the roadways that we have to make sure that we do solve some of those other issues that we have. I think, you know, the last note there is pedestrian safety will also impact our recommendations. We'll look at those things. We'll look at the crossings. We want to adopt methods of setting speed limits based on, we want to adopt these methods and probably add it to our traffic calming toolbox. So we actually have this as kind of a city policy that's been adopted by city council. Then we want to come back to the council. We want to provide options for traffic calming to help reduce the speeds on the roadways that we still have speed issues, because all of them do have some speed issues. The greater vehicle counts over the speed limit will require more of an active traffic calming solution, whereas the ones that aren't quite as bad, we'll look at more passive solutions. And then, like I said, pedestrian safety is going to be one of our concerns that we will also be looking at as we make recommendations for traffic calming to the city council.
with the speed limit table that you had, given that a significant reason for recommending a lower speed limit than the software spit out was because they're taking into account that 85th percentile. Looking at it seems to me that 11200, Canal Mid, and 9600 are the three places where we should really be paying attention to traffic calming, because that suggests that those are the places where that 85th percentile is really high.
Absolutely. Yep.
And of those three, I really think that Canal Mid needs to be an urgent high priority for us. We said that we did not want to remove the temporary speed tables without putting something else in. And then we went ahead and removed them without putting something else in. We said that we would have information back for those residents about some options for speed calming in April. And then we decided we wanted to take a broader view of it. And so we did not have that for them in April. I would really like to see in July if we can get some recommendations and talk through what are some specific things we should be looking at for Canal Mid, especially for some traffic calming that we can put in there.
We can provide that in July.
You know, we're not the only community that has this issue. I noticed that Lehigh, and I'd mentioned this, they're putting up those little flags. We got to check with some of our neighboring communities to say what has worked for your traffic calming. I mean, if there's little flags, I mean, the cost-wise is going, I don't know, it's just like these little flagpole things, or I mean, it's, those little plastic things that just kind of narrow the road in there. But if someone hits it, it doesn't really cause a lot of damage, but at least I think it causes people visually to slow down. And I don't know if it's working for Lehigh or not.
I'd be interested. I've seen areas in Lehigh where they have those to kind of line bike corridors. I wonder how many of those they lose a year to snow plows with just snow hitting them. Just curious. You know, my guess is like maybe a third that they have to replace, but just knowing how much force you get from thrown snow.
Correct.
But
I'd be curious to, even during this time, does it calm that traffic?
Does it
When
work?
You're talking about the Canal Mid, where we know it's a wide road, so that's why people feel comfortable. If we narrow it in, will it cause the traffic to slow down?
Right.
A great example of that is 1120 in American Fork. It's 25 miles an hour, and they've designed that road where it is comfortable going 25. It is so narrow. They have a bike lane, then they have 5 feet section between the bike lane and the lane that you're in. The lane is probably 10 or 11 feet, not the 12, 14 feet that would automatically require more. So I think we need to look at that, especially on 9600. When you look at the numbers, 9600 concerns me deeply. We've got to get some traffic calming in onto 9600, and I think looking at how that was done, there's actually curves in the road, and I drive it all the time intentionally because I'm going, how does this speed limit really affect going from one place to another? And I go down Canal to get to Costco and Lowe's and Home Depot and Walmart there, and I go there quite often, but I always come back 11:20, and when I do, they've done a good job, and I think we need to look at that.
As we look at the data, the one thing that tells me I know we've been focusing on Canal, but it tells me 9600 North is actually the issue. I'm just saying, we have our speeds higher, we have 80 homes off that. It's telling me where and I appreciate they all want to have, but I'm going, it's telling me we need to be looking at 96 how to calm.
And the only reason that I put Canal Mid higher than that is because we have made commitments to those residents that we have just backed off on.
I'd like to bring more, of these roads to the next meeting, and we have had our portable driver feedback sign out on 9600 just to help with that, and I'd like to move that one up to 11200 next, because that again has had a lot of higher speeds.
Can I make just one little comment? I don't know how much communication you have with the neighboring cities, but I'm still curious why American Fork does not connect 700 North to the Alpine Highway, because that connector, if it went across, goes all the way over to Lehigh from Canyon Road and Pleasant Grove. And yes, it's residential, But a lot of that traffic is coming up and going up on Canal. I watch it every day, how many cars are coming up from American Fork. And they help build the road through Mag. But it'd be interesting to see, because that also puts more traffic on 9600. So, and they approved, I mean, in the road study we did in 2017, they were going to build that road in 2019. It didn't happen. 2 years ago, in their city council, they approved funding for it. So why don't they build it? It's one block, it's up a hill, but it's no bigger deal than when we built the east-west corridor here. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to know why they're delaying that, because it really puts traffic up on our roads. And I mean, we're not an island.
Maybe some residents in the neighborhood came and, you know, complained about it being connected, and so then they decided not to connect it.
Well, you know that's true, but at the same time, that puts all the traffic up in our area. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good learning.
And I can follow up with them and see.
No, just maybe see what
Once
their
I've-
plans are.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that information. Okay, we'll now move on to some communication items. We have, Doug, you have on water conservation. I know that, well, I'll go ahead and turn some time over to you because you put this on the agenda.
Sure, I will be brief. That we have talked about the Rip Your Strip rebates in the past. Some of us were surprised to hear that Alpine residents were eligible for those rebates. I took a look, and the Alpine, American Fork, Cedar Hills, Draper, Lehigh, Linden, Orem, Sandy, South Jordan, Spanish Fork, Utah County unincorporated areas, and Vineyard have all passed the ordinance that makes them eligible. I distributed to council members a copy of the Alpine ordinance that they passed to make themselves eligible. I think that is something that we need to take a look at and discuss again. Is that something that we're okay with, or is it too restrictive and we don't want to move forward?
Or can we tweak it?
Or potentially, can we tweak it?
No.
Or do you
just
pass
as
it and not enforce it? I'm just,
right.
I assume some cities passed it so people get the funding, and I assume they're not
they're not.
enforcing certain things, and they're doing that right-eye little look, you know, that little squint.
Doug, I support you on this. I remember that decision we were made, and you know what? I think I would have made a different decision after learning more about it. So yes, I support on that.
And just an interesting little tidbit, that of the cities that allow golf carts, we are the only one that isn't eligible for the Rip Your Strip rebates.
Now,
Elk Ridge,
now
Hurricane,
101%.
Nephi, and St. George are all eligible.
101 now % support you.
One other thing that I am interested in, not just pressurized irrigation conservation, but culinary as well. And there are some rebates for both culinary and PI that I think we should be publicizing out to residents. There are some easy things to do to help with avoiding water waste that we should be publicizing out. There's a $150 rebate available for replacing old toilets with WaterSense toilets. There's a $100 rebate for installing smart irrigation controllers. If you have a faucet that is dripping just 10 drips a minute, it is wasting you a gallon a day.
Do they have a rebate for that?
They do not, alas. And that if you do not have a low flow shower head and you replace it with one, that saves roughly 800 gallons a month.
What type of shower head?
Low flow. Okay. So I think that we should be making an effort to publicize that sort of information out to residents.
Can I ask a quick question? Who pays the rebates again?
I think that I don't know if it is the state or if it is the WaterSense group, which is a state organization.
It's a state. But I mean, there are some federal, but this is state.
Okay. That's been, I mean, we did, I want to say 7 years ago when they were doing the rebates on the controllers. I remember we did do a push out, I think, through the city to educate, but we haven't kept it going. So, okay, well, now I'll go on to
Can
the next
I
item.
quickly just, I spoke with Alpine a little bit as well to kind of get some clarification there. So, and really, the model ordinance is the same as it's always been, right? As far as like a certain percentage of lawn in the front and side that you've got to limit to, right? And our concern has always been, how do you enforce that? And so Central Utah ended up reaching out to me, right, to say, hey, we'd love to talk to you more about it. So I just need to know from council if we're serious about considering this or not, I guess, or if you guys just need some time to think through it, knowing that it's a pretty strict requirement, right? The ordinance itself that they want you to adopt.
Did Albion say how they enforce it?
The right eye.
I got it.
Commercial is easier because you have a site plan review, right? Residential is very difficult because you don't necessarily have to have your landscaping done when you do a certificate of occupancy, and that's really not something we as staff look at.
To your question about seriousness, I am not prepared to say that if this ordinance comes before us, I will vote in favor of it, but I'm very serious about looking at it and considering it.
So I'd like time to look at this and think about it. I mean, the rebates are nice, but I think we voted against it before because we thought it was way too strict.
It was 30, I think it was, they're requiring 30%.
Will you go forward like 2 slides, Jay?
Yeah.
I lied, like one more, maybe. Yeah, so you can't do lawns less than 8 feet, and then 35% for residential, the front and side yard. Only 35% of it can be grass.
So that affects all new construction.
New, yes, I should
regardless
clarify.
of whether people collect the rebates or not?
Correct. Our ordinance has to say on new homes, you can't do more lawn than 35% in your front and side yard.
That, as a corner lot owner, it seems like a corner lot could have a problem with that because you're 30 feet back, where normally it's 10. So it'd be interesting how that plays out with corner lots.
There are some exceptions that they carve out for small lots, very small lots, but I didn't see something about corner lots, but we could ask them.
And my recollection is that, I haven't looked at it really deeply, but
Yeah.
my recollection is that the exceptions for small lots will almost never apply in Highland.
Not in Highland, yeah. Very small lots. Is it worth us to have a conversation with Central Utah?
I'd like to hear more information.
They volunteered to even come to a council meeting, so we'll have an initial conversation with them and go
Well,
forward.
and I'd like to understand more how big the rebates are and stuff, because this is fairly restrictive.
Okay.
That's where the council was at before. We felt with the 35% coverage in the front yard and side yard is why they kind of backed off. Okay. So the council said, yes, bring it back, and I think Central Utah would be good to have come. Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll now go to the financial year 2026 budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Jay, if you could move forward a few. All right, so we just wanted to bring an update to the council regarding our fiscal year 26 budget. We're 2 weeks away from our anticipated final adoption. So we wanted to just bring some of the changes that have happened to the budget since the May 6th tentative version, make sure everybody's on the same page. In recent meetings, we've discussed an increase to the assessment to the Lone Peak Public Safety District. We've added that back into the budget. It's partially for animal shelter costs, partially for adding back in personnel to the fire department. We have also, we haven't discussed this one yet, but there's a portion of our current year trail maintenance budget that we anticipate not using. And we would like to carry that forward to the next year to use it in fiscal year 26. So that totals $105,000. So it would just be using the fund balance that's not being used this year.
Why was it not used this year?
I think that's a great question.
We got the bid package together so late in the season that we thought we would get a better economy of scale to just package it with projects that we would have planned for next fiscal year. And instead of doing 2 projects somewhat close together, we would just do one big project that we thought we could get better prices.
I think in the years past, you were correct. I think we had those who were doing some of the road work would come in and do the trail maintenance. So what you're saying is because we're a little late, we didn't get those bids put together and have the same contract.
Correct.
Yep. Next item, the library, if you remember, it was decided that the general fund would help the library to balance. There's about just under $11,000 already in the budget for that. We made some adjustments to the library's budget, including library director wage and benefit increases, and felt it appropriate for the general fund to help cover those. So this is an additional $12,500 for that to bring the total to about $23,000-ish.
And to be clear, we took a look and identified that there was tax that had been due to the library fund in the past that we did not pay, and this is a repayment
Correct.
process.
Yep.
On the library director wage, Jay has a percentage from the library that's paid to his salary. Where is that shown? I believe Donna believes it comes from her line item wage. Is that where it is?
There is. So there are
She's actually getting
employees-
less than what we're seeing.
Well, so Donna is allocated 100% to the library. So the changes that we made that make up this 12,000 is 100% for the library director position. There is a portion in her salaries line item that is intended for administrative purposes. So a portion of Jay's, I don't remember.
But it's not
5%.
the library director's
Did we
salary,
leave
it's the
you and
library's
Jess?
wage of all employees.
That's what I need clarification on. Is it the director's salary, or is it the whole wage section that 5% comes out of?
So there's one GL account for all wages in the library for full time that includes all of the library director and then these small percentages of various other administrative employees within the city that help administrate the library.
Well, okay, but what I think, if we look, there's a budget set for wages in the library budget. That's where you're saying that the administration cost is coming out of that. It's not specific saying, okay, we have a director, and let's just, if the wage of that director is $100,000, but we paid $5,000 out to go to the city. It's not specific employee, it's just specific budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. All right, next slide, Jay. So in order to make the budget balance and work for the general fund, we had to make an adjustment to the transfer to our roads capital improvement fund. So this money, if you remember, was intended to be used for the 10,400 North and 6,000 West pedestrian improvements. Phase one of that project, it was $250,000 initially. So due to the need to free up some space in the general fund budget for public safety, we decreased that by $120,000. So now there's $130,000 being transferred into the capital funds project for that project.
And on that, we are trying to seek for some grants, if it be from the Utah County, if it be from the Safe Trails, not the Safer Routes.
Safe Routes to Schools.
We're looking at a lot of different grant options that might be able to help us be able to get that project done.
Yep. So that's all the changes for the general fund. Jumping into the other funds, library, there is one other change.
At this time, Brittany Bills has now left, if you notice that. Hey, have a safe flight. Okay, sorry, just one.
No, you're good. The library board requested an additional $10,000 be added to their budget for books and materials. So this is for hard copy books, not digital. And they asked that come from the library's existing fund balance. So we've added that in. And then the final item.
The library fund balance, is that the 77,000 they have? Wasn't it like 77,000?
The exact number is escaping me, but I can tell you. Yeah, approximately 80,000 to begin the fiscal year. Yep.
And that's kind of their reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So they're asking to be able to pull out of the reserve $10,000 to be able to buy books and material.
Yep.
To replace rather than buy new, but yes.
This is actually an item that's really overdue for the library. There's been so much focus on programs and the expenditures needed for programs that it's been somewhat neglected. And Donna actually feels bad about that. I don't think she should, because I think we ask any resident of Highland, what is the library? And it's going to be what she's done to pull the community together.
Oh, yeah.
with
She's done a great
programs.
job.
And the books are there. But having said that, if you go in there and look at those books, especially the children's section, they're in really bad shape, and it has been neglected. So we do need to get this money in there and look at the future of how we're going to get that fixed.
Ron,
because-
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
On some of these things, I mean, we've got the fund reserve in the library, which kind of developed, I think, during the COVID time, because there didn't used to be reserve. So I support taking this out, but I guess when they get kind of like, some of the books are getting really dire, why they don't pull a little bit out of the library foundation.
I don't have the answer to that. I
Yeah,
don't know.
because
We didn't
I
vote that
think,
as a board.
I think some of the donors to that thought maybe some of that would be used for books and materials when things were tight.
That's
So,
something
I mean,
I
you've
can
got
take
your
back to the
reserve,
board.
but, you know, I think the foundation's been kind of used more for when infrastructure stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
And just briefly, I spoke with Donna and pushed back on this a little bit as well. That the physical collection has been neglected storyline. That I don't believe that is the case. I don't believe that we have been neglecting the public, the physical collection. I think we have not been spending as much as we needed to on it, but we have all along been spending money to replace books. It's just that we've realized that we need to accelerate that.
Yeah, the terminology and, you know, how you express it, and I understand the difference, but is there a need that needs to be addressed?
Sure, I agree.
The next item is the fire station.
Yeah, so similar to the trails, there's delays with the fire station driveway that we're not going to use all of the budget that's in the current fiscal year. So we're proposing to move just over $144,000 to fiscal year 26 to finish the project out.
Is that because of the power company?
Yeah.
Do we have any idea when they're going to get around to that? Or is that still a real soon now answer?
I am to the point where I'm leaving messages almost daily now, trying to get a response, and no luck so far. I guess next step needs to be an in-person visit.
I will tell you, when you're building something, the very first thing you need to go do is get your power lined up, because it takes so long. I mean, I met with some partners tomorrow. We got a lease signed. They go, the very first thing we got to get power, because it's taken 4 to 6 months.
I heard some rumblings come out of the state legislature that they're not happy with Rocky Mountain at all. And I'm just wondering if we just need to express our concerns to our legislators. Look, we can't do projects because they're not coming forth. And I thought $51,000 or however much spent to hook up this city maintenance building seemed like a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not sure they're being as responsive as they need to.
We always could go to Lehigh and ask them to give us the power.
Yeah.
Okay, any others?
Yeah, next slide, Jay. Final item to note, changes in the budget. There was, in our fiscal year 25 budget, we have 1.5 million budgeted for TSSD sewer disposal. That is coming, it's going to be, because of their increases, more like 1.8 million. So needing to adjust that budget, which will come before you on the 17th in our budget adjustments, but that results in a decreased available fund balance for investment. So because of that, the new calculation that we're using for interest has changed for the sewer fund. So this is a decrease because of that.
I'd just like to thank you for having that item on the list. That I do not know this for sure. This is a suspicion and an impression on my part. But my suspicion and impression is that in past years that would never have happened. Yes. Because we didn't have a formula that we were using to rationally decide what that interest was going to be. And so I really appreciate that you put that in place, and that we think it's going to be less, and so we're budgeting less.
Yeah.
I concur.
All right, the last thing we wanted to talk about, next slide, Jay. So potential changes for the final budget. As you know, we were intended to have a work session tonight to talk about water rates. We've had a study underway with LRB. We made some adjustments to the phasing of some of the large projects that we have coming up. The result of that change, it's looking like we aren't going to need an immediate change in water rates, which is why we're no longer having the work session tonight. We will still need to evaluate that and come back with that later. But as of right now, it doesn't look like fiscal year 26 will have any change in rates. Cemetery fund, we're continuing with that study. Also, just timing wise, it doesn't look like that's going to be completed before our final budget adoption, but there could be some implications to the budget in the form of a mid-year adjustment when we get that back, and if there are recommendations that we need to adjust. Certified tax rate, we're getting really close. It should be the next few days that we get that from the county. That will impact our property tax revenues. There's a chance that that could change a little bit. And then the last one, our public safety fee. So we've talked multiple times in the past about kind of this level that the council set in our budget retreat, saying that they're comfortable with us using 75% of our sales and property taxes to help pay for public safety. That if we go beyond that, we start to get a little bit uncomfortable and want to look at options. So next slide, Jay. So this is an updated chart we've shown you before, but this is including the added assessments because of the fire personnel and the animal shelter costs. So you can, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen up there, but we're above 81% at this point. So next slide. So the options, we had discussed both public safety fee option or property tax option. The property tax option was not recommended. So we're still looking at public safety fee and would like some feedback from the council if they still are interested in looking at the public safety fee right now. If we're just going to go with the budget as is right now and kind of go above that 75% while we're still reevaluating and deciding how we want to approach this. But we just wanted to bring the topic up again for discussion and as is, if we wanted to get back to that 75% of our property and sales taxes being used to pay for public safety, we would need to increase the public safety fee by about 41%, which would be from $15.25 a month to $21.50 per month.
So I thought the agreement was to neither raise the public safety fee this year nor increase property tax this time, because I thought we were in mediation or some things going on with Alpine about that would affect how much we have to pay for public safety. Am I incorrect?
No, the motion was that we would be increasing, which we see in our budget where we changed the 10,400, 6,000 West project, but it was subject to working through their interlocal.
Right.
And I just asked David to include this because I hadn't gotten a final, no, we're not doing this yet. I mean, I thought that was the direction the council was heading, but the last direction we got is we're still considering it, kind of a thing. So wanted to bring this to you for one last, I'm assuming we're not moving forward, but wanted to make sure that it was, you had the information.
We're going to have to address these things in the future, but right now we don't know what's going to happen.
And I think that's really fair.
Interlocal agreement with Alpine over public safety and all this stuff. You know, I think we should just, if we've got the reserves a little bit.
Since we're bringing that up, we have we have proposals from a mediator to be able to help us walk through the community, look at different things and have a mediator. That will be decided on the board next Wednesday. If we use a mediator or what we do.
Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable being at just over 81.5%, but I agree with Scott that we're in negotiation. We don't know what that number is actually going to be. So
yeah, we may get more money from the other.
Okay, that's great. That's all the update we had for tonight. We will bring the final budget to you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Or 2 weeks, we vote on the budget, correct?
So, excuse me. Let me just ask, my experience with the certified tax rate is they try to keep the same property tax we've had in the past. So they adjust it one way or the other based on the valuations of the homes. Plus, we get the new revenue from the growth, right? My experience has been on the counter of that is that certified tax rate sometimes just tweaks it up just a little bit, plus the growth. So they never lower it down below what it was before. You know, I mean, the rate changes because of the valuations of the homes. But okay, but I've never seen them come and say, oh, you're going to get less property tax than you did last year.
No, it's set up so that our property tax should stay stable.
It's stable.
We should never see a
plus
decrease
growth.
in the dollar amount, but we'll see an increase for growth. I debated whether to give this information, but there is preliminary data on their website, not for the rate, but just for the revenue that they expect. I hesitate to give it just because it can change as they finalize the rate. But as of right now, they have $2,140,000 for the city and $322,700 for the library. For the city, that's about $10,000 more than what we currently have in the budget. For the library, it's about $1,000 more. So we're pretty close there.
On the certified tax rate and the stability of it, is that based on a municipality, based on a county? What is the demographic that they stay within to determine?
Each city.
Yeah, each city individually.
It's each city, yeah.
Okay, okay.
I think it's technically probably each taxing jurisdiction, but
Which is a city. Well, yeah, there could be a special district. Okay, we'll now move on to number 7C, which is community development update.
Nothing big, but you might have seen in the agenda, there was a little link next to this now that takes you to the current projects list on Highland City, where you can look through everything that's currently being constructed or somewhere was approved. Just want to make sure if you had any questions about any of that, or if you had any issues accessing
Thank you
that.
so much.
The great thing about that is it shows you information that you wouldn't have gotten before they changed. You don't get it now, but you didn't get it before then either. So this is extra special good.
Okay, thank you.
We do have our general plan thing next week as usual, and it's land use part the second.
Okay, school district update. They are just how our city is now in the mix of having registration for candidates. They are also having registration for candidates. I believe in our area, there's only been one candidate register to run for the Highland seat.
Which to me is extremely problematic. I hope each one of us roll up our sleeves and call people and try to get somebody. We need to have some choices there. I don't know how old this kid is, but he's a young kid, and I know nothing about him. It's not about him. This is about having options. This is about having choices. And seat number 3 right now has one candidate, and I hope that changes.
And did we just have till Friday to get someone?
Friday at 5 o'clock. So
I'm surprised as controversial this is that there's not more people.
I'm flabbergasted.
I'll call. I know one I thought was going to register. Would you call? I've already texted her. We don't need to talk about it, but we need to reach out, and we need to reach out if here with the school district to make sure we have good quality candidates that are running.
Right. So it has some choice.
So, and then I think we all are aware that in the city election, which it appears we have 4 candidates so far that have registered for city council and 1 registered for mayor. 4 good candidates.
True.
With that, we had on our agenda a work session that's been continued since we don't have anything. We do need a motion to go in. If there's nothing else that we need to discuss, we need a motion. We do have a closed session that we need to discuss.
Before we do that motion, Mayor, since this is kind of updates and that, can I just ask a quick question? So on the commercial area around Costa Vida and the park strips, is it the businesses or the city that's responsible to maintain it because it looks awful? So Boyer maintains everything around. I'm talking about the business end, Costa Vida, the former Arby's, and the other area. None of it's being maintained at all.
Are you talking along 4800?
It's the park strip.
Okay.
Now 4800 as well as North County Boulevard. So the businesses aren't maintaining it. The city isn't, and Boyer isn't because it's not part of their project. If you go up and look at it, it looks bad. I just wondered who's in charge.
If you remember, we adopted something that said, here's who's maintaining what. And so let us review that and we will follow up with you.
If it's the businesses, they need to get on the stick because it looks bad.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
I need a motion to adjourn to closed session.
I move that the city council recess the regular city council meeting to convene in a closed meeting in the executive conference room to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual and pending or reasonably imminent litigation as provided by Utah Code Annotated, section 524205.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Doug, second by Scott. We'll go ahead and we'll do a roll call. Ron? Kim?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
And Scott?
Yes.
We're now in closed session.